Chapter 1973. All right. Baichuan smiled helplessly. In the vast 10,000 elephant sea, it was rare for the first island master to act like Lu Yi, especially when the three-world island was already a top-tier spiritual island. Which of the other island masters didn't firmly grasp the financial power of the island in their hands? Only Lu Yi didn't seem to care at all. Baichuan didn't know whether to say that he had a big heart, or was free and easy. Putting aside the matter of the spiritual jades for now, Baichuan said, "Junior brother, there are now a few new Yu Yao on the island. Aside from everyone here, there are 18 other Yu Yao on the island. These newly ascended Yu Yao were all cultivators of the Jade Conch realm. When they first came to the myriad manifestations sea, they were already late-stage constellation realm cultivators. After cultivating in the Three Realms island for all these years, they were able to advance. The cultivators of the 9 prefectures had started too late. Therefore, although there were cultivators at the late stage of the constellation realm, there were no cultivators at Yu Yao's level. As for the Qingli Dao realm, there was something wrong with this realm itself. The cultivators who ascended to the constellations in this realm had their paths cut off. There was basically no hope of ascending to Yu Yao. How should we deal with these new Yu Yao? Junior brother, please come up with a plan, Baichuan said. Lu Yi asked, "What about the other spiritual islands?" Baichuan said, "Although the myriad phenomenon sea doesn't have any rules regarding the maximum number of Yu Yao a spiritual island can accommodate, the other forces would usually send out new Yu Yao if they have one. They would either return to their own world, or leave the island to make a living on their own. After all, the energy on each spiritual island is limited. Yu Yao's consumption of energy is much greater than that of the constellations. If there are too many Yu Yao, it would affect the cultivation efficiency of the constellations. Therefore, there are usually not many Yu Yao on other spiritual islands. Just like Bai Yu and Zixian back then, there were actually not many Yu Yao. It was not that they did not have them, but that there was no need for so many Yu Yao to remain on the spiritual island. Every spiritual island could only have 5 guardian Yu Yao. Therefore, even if there were 100 Yu Yao on the island, only the 5 registered guardians would be able to participate in the battle. There were already more than 20 Yu Yao in Three World Island, and there would be more in the future. So, it was time to consider this problem. Sending the extra Yu Yao out was indeed a good idea. With her strength at this level, she should have no problem making a living. However, the situation on Yuan Du's side was unclear at the moment. If he really did that, it might give the enemy an opportunity to take advantage of. As for returning them to their home world, not only was the journey far away, just the explosion zone alone was extremely dangerous for Yu Yao and her companions. If things went wrong, they might even die. After pondering for a moment, Lu Yi said, "Let them do what they want. There's no need to send them out." They were all new to the spiritual island. Even if Yu Yao consumed some of the spiritual island's energy, how much energy could she consume? Moreover, he could also adjust the power of the minor constellation palace, which was enough to ensure that the three-world island had a good cultivation environment. In that case, senior brother thanks junior brother on their behalf. Baichuan nodded. In truth, he was also a little worried about the ability of those newly ascended Yu Yao to make a living. Lu Ye's words had undoubtedly relieved him of his worries. After all, those newly ascended Yu Yao were all members of the Jade Conch realm. If he allowed them to continue cultivating, it would undoubtedly be better for them to stabilize their cultivation bases. That's right, Lu Yi suddenly said. Did anyone come looking for me while I was away? If Ma Bin had come to the three-world island, he would definitely have let Zhu Yuan inform him. Although 3 months was not a long time, the sun moved very quickly. If Ma Bin had set off immediately after they parted ways, he might have already reached the 10,000 elephant sea. Yes, Baichuan nodded. I was just about to tell junior brother about this. Oh, Lu Yi raised his brows. Where is he? Baichuan said. Near the spirit jade mine. Lu Yi was stunned. Was Ma Bin really that efficient? He had already arrived before he had even returned. Moreover, he had already entered the spirit jade mine. However, after thinking about it for a moment, He felt that something was not quite right. If Ma Bin had come, he would have definitely contacted him. If he had not been around, he would have only waited. There was no way he would have contacted He Baichuan. However, if it was not Ma Bin, then who was the one inside the spirit jade mine? Lu Yi suddenly had a bad feeling. He looked at He Baichuan. Senior brother, who are you talking about? The backer of the Three-World Island, Senior Jiuyan from the Che Ling realm. He Baichuan looked at him in confusion. Junior brother. Who else do you think it could be? Jiuyan. Lu Yi was dumbfounded. Why would Jiuyan come to the Three-World Island and occupy the spirit jade mine? What was she trying to do? More importantly, he had already promised Ma Bin to let him use the spirit jade mine to heal his injuries. However, now that Jiuyan was inside, if the two of them accidentally met, Lu Yi did not dare to imagine what would happen. He suddenly remembered something that Ma Bin had said before. When this old senior from the 9 states had mentioned the spirit jade mine, he had said that it was not only a resource that could only be found in a top-tier realm. It was also related to Rizhao's future path. Lu Yi did not know what Rizhao's future path would be like. His level of cultivation was not high enough, so he had not come into contact with it for the time being. However, from the looks of it, Jiuyan might have come to the Three-World Island because of this. However, the timing was too unfortunate. Jiuyan had not mentioned coming to the Three-World Island in the past. Lu Yi suddenly remembered that the Three-World Island had only become a top-tier spiritual island after the battle with Zixian. In the past, the Three-World Island had only been a top-tier spiritual island. Naturally, Jiuyan would not have been attracted to the Three-World Island. On the surface, she was the backer of the Three-World Island. Back then, it was because of her that the Three-World Island was able to gain a foothold in the Wanxiang Sea and develop rapidly. Jiuyan had not made any requests at all. Now that the spirit jade mine was beneficial to her cultivation, who could say anything if she wanted to occupy it? Not to mention that Lu Yi wasn't there at the time. Even if Lu Yi was there, he wouldn't have dared to say no. However, if that was the case, what about Ma Bin? Lu Yi felt a headache coming on. Many thoughts flashed through his mind. It was obviously not appropriate to bring Ma Bin back to the dwarf tribe. He did not want to have anything to do with the dwarf tribe. More importantly, he did not want to be involved with the 9 states. Since that was the case, there was only one place left for him to go. How are senior sister Luan and elder Yin Miao doing recently? Lu Yi turned to look at Yuxi and Cheng Xian. Yuxi had a standard foxy face. When she smiled, she was very charming. She said softly. Reporting to the first island master, senior sister Luan and great elder miss you very much. A few days ago, they sent a message saying that if the first island master comes back, remember to tell you good news. Lu Yi was stunned. He immediately understood and could not help but smile. Okay. I will go back and visit the 2 senior sisters. Yuxi did not say it too clearly. After all, there was a local Rizhao in the Three-World Island, so she did not dare to say it too clearly. However, Lu Yi already knew what she meant. He did not expect that in just a few years, the 2 of them had succeeded. This was really a pleasant surprise. Although this good news should not be made public, this way, Ma Bin could go to the mermaid tribe's spiritual land to heal. He would not have to worry about disturbing the 2's cultivation. In fact, the 2 of them could even ask Ma Bin about Rizhao's cultivation experience. As a veteran Rizhao who had been promoted for who knows how many years, it would not be a problem for him to give guidance to 2 newcomers. In this way, the Three-World Island could be considered to have its own Rizhao. Although he had just been promoted, Rizhao was still Rizhao. He was not someone Yu Yao could compare to. The worries in his heart were swept away, and Lu Ye's mood became much more relaxed. Also, as He Baichuan spoke, he took out a storage ring and handed it to Lu Yi. In the past few years, the island has put out a bounty and found a few treasures for junior brother. There are not many, but junior brother can use them. Lu Ye's mood became even better when he took a look at them. Shockingly, these were all treasures that could be used to temper one's source of magic. Even though there weren't many of them, it was undoubtedly not easy to find them in a place like the Myriad Sea. Since he could find these few items, he would definitely be able to find more. Increase the bounty. Collect as many of these treasures as possible at all costs, Lu Yi instructed. Okay, I will arrange it later, He Baichuan agreed. After the meeting, everyone dispersed. Lu Yi had a rough understanding of the situation on the three-world island in the past few years. He sat cross-legged in his bamboo building and used the power of his talent tree to refine the treasures. He felt that the quality of his art source had improved by a sliver, and he was one step closer to perfection. Satisfied, he stood up and left the bamboo building, heading in a certain direction. There were very few people on the road. On the three-world island, cultivators would only walk around when they were on patrol duty. Most of the time, they would be cultivating on their own. They had all come from poor places, so they naturally knew how precious and rare such a good cultivation environment was. Any cultivator with even the slightest ambition would not waste their time. As a result, the environment on the three-world island could be said to be two distinct areas. The trade area was bustling with people, while the area where the cultivators were stationed was quiet and empty. There were very few traces of people. Soon he arrived in front of a building. With a light flick of his finger, a spell formation was activated. Soon, a head poked out from the second floor of the building. When he saw Lu Yi, he was overjoyed. Big brother. With that, he retracted his head. After a while, the door to the building opened. Chushan walked out with a smile. Big brother, you're back? Outsiders only knew that Lu Yi had been cultivating in seclusion for the past few years. Only a few people knew that he had not been on the three-world island. Chushan was undoubtedly one of them. Lu Yi looked him up and down and nodded slightly. Your cultivation has improved quite well. You're already Yu Yao? Chushan's cultivation talent was undoubtedly very high. When they last met, he was already close to Yu Yao. It was not surprising that he had advanced. Chushan chuckled. It's all thanks to Big Brother. If I hadn't come to the three-world island to cultivate, how could my cultivation have improved so quickly? Big brother, come in and talk. After a while the two brothers sat down. Chushan poured a cup of tea for Lu Yi. Then he looked at Lu Yi curiously. Big brother, when did you advance to Sunshine? Lu Yi laughed. Is Sunshine that easy? Chushan said matter-of-factly. Of course it's not easy for others, but for Big Brother, it's as easy as pie. It was as if he thought that Lu Yi was omnipotent. Lu Yi did not know why he thought this way. He could only reply, I still need to polish it for a while. Chapter 1974. Speaking of which, he was really lucky to have met Chu Shun in the 10,000 Elephant Sea. If not for Chu Shun, he would not have met Juyan. Without Ling Realm, the three-world island's predicament would not have been resolved. It was because of Chu Shun that Lu Yi had gone to the Ling boundary to visit Jiuyan. Since then, the three-world island had had a smooth sailing. Today, it had been promoted to a top-tier spiritual island, and no one dared to covet it. Chu Shun was a descendant of Rizhao. However, he did not have the usual arrogance of Rizhao's descendants. He was simple and honest and had great potential. He would definitely achieve great things in the future. After leaving the 9 states for so many years, Lu Yi had met many people of all shapes and sizes. However, there were not many whom he could really interact with. Chu Shun was one of them. The two brothers chatted for a while. Then Lu Yi said, Actually, I came to find you because I have something to ask you. About my mother? Chu Shun understood. Lu Yi nodded. Did Senior Juyan say anything to you? Chu Shun shook his head. She did not say much. She only said that the spirit jade mine here is beneficial to her cultivation. That is why she came here. She wanted to mention it to you before. But you were not in the three-world island, so she went in herself. Indeed, it seemed that the spirit jade mine was an extremely important cultivation resource to Rizhao. This had nothing to do with the production of spirit jade. Instead, it was a mystery that Lu Yi did not know about. That mystery could even heal the injuries to Ma Bin's Dao Foundation. After pondering for a while, Lu Yi said, Since Senior is here, I have to pay him a visit. Little brother Shen, if you have nothing to do, why don't you come with me? No matter what, he was the first island master of the three-world island. Now that his backer was here, as the master of the three-world island, he had to pay him a visit. Otherwise it would be rude. It would be easier to talk to Chu Shun if he brought him along. This was why he came to find Chu Shun first. But Chu Shun was about to nod when his expression suddenly changed. Then, he shrank his neck and looked at Lu Yi pitifully. Big brother, mother told me to focus on my cultivation and not be distracted. Lu Yi blinked. He did not sense that someone was watching them. However, since Juyin had sent him a message, it meant that she had been paying attention. As expected, Rizhao's power wasn't something that Yu Yao could fathom. Then you should focus on your cultivation. Lu Yi said and stood up. I'll come and see you again later. Take care, big brother. Chu Shun waved his hand. After leaving Chu Shun's residence, Lu Yi went straight to the spiritual jade vein. He couldn't help but feel a little nervous. He couldn't describe his feelings towards Jiu Yan, but he felt that this senior was different from the other Rizhao he had met before. Especially his attitude towards him, he seemed to be annoyed. However, Lu Yi didn't think she had done anything to offend her. If she really did hate her, why would she be willing to become Three World Islands' backer? Lu Yi couldn't figure it out, but he didn't have the time to think about it. Juyin didn't want Chu Shun to follow them, so she probably wanted to talk to him alone. It didn't take long for them to reach the entrance to the Spirit Jade Mine. Cultivators from the island were stationed here. Ordinary people, even if they were from the island, were not allowed to enter without orders. Seeing Lu Yi, several cultivators hurriedly saluted. Lu Yi waved his hand and walked straight into the cave. The Spirit Jade Vein of Three World Island wasn't very big, so the cave wasn't very deep. After walking for about 100 feet, they arrived at the vein. The energy here was extremely dense, especially at the locations of the veins. Many spirit jades were being nurtured, whether they were formed or not. A voluptuous figure was sitting cross-legged there. Her eyes were closed, and her hands were placed on her knees. Her hair was tied up into a woman's bun, revealing her slender and fair neck. Her tight palace attire revealed an exaggerated curve of her breasts, which tugged at one's heartstrings. However, what made Lu Yi helpless was that Juyan's face was still shrouded in light, making it difficult for him to see clearly. It was the same when he went to the Che Ling realm last time, and this time, he lowered his head and cupped his fists. Lu Yi greeted Senior. There was no response. Lu Yi just stood there and waited. He waited for more than half a day, but Lu Yi didn't show any signs of impatience. He just silently thought about his own matters. He knew that Sunshine had no concept of time, but since Juyin had sent a message to Chu Shun, she definitely wouldn't leave him here. After a while, Juyin's voice suddenly rang out. In the starry sky, sunshine is the peak. No matter who it is, once they reach the peak of sunshine, their cultivation will have no room for improvement. Do you know where the path lies after sunshine? Lu Yi was stunned. He shook his head and said, this junior doesn't know. He was only in the late moon jade realm, and hadn't reached sunshine yet. How would he know the path after sunshine? After sunshine is Dao. Dao. Lu Yi looked puzzled. But didn't Senior say that sunshine is the peak? If that's the case, then where does Dao come from in the future? Juyin seemed to chuckle. Sunshine is the peak, and after sunshine is Dao. The timing is different, and the path ahead is different. Lu Yi thought hard. He didn't understand why Juyin would suddenly tell him these things. Juyin seemed to have seen through his doubts. She slowly said, you are extremely talented and your strength is improving rapidly. Sooner or later, you will face these problems. I just don't know if you will be able to find your own Dao by then. Senior praises me too much. This junior is still worried about breaking through to sunshine. These matters are a little far away from me. Juyin said, don't belittle yourself. When that day comes. She suddenly stopped talking and changed the topic. The foundation of the three-world island is shallow. There seems to be no expert behind you to guide you. The path of cultivation will be bumpy. Since you are close to Shin'er, I would like to accept you as my disciple. Are you willing? Lu Yi was completely stunned. He didn't have much contact with Juyin. The last time they met, Juyin didn't seem to have a good impression of him. Therefore, he didn't expect Juyin to have the intention of accepting him as her disciple. However, in the eyes of outsiders, the foundation of the three-world island was very shallow. There was no sunshine in the entire Jade Conch galaxy. Julian's suggestion was undoubtedly out of goodwill. It was mostly for Chu Shen's sake. But in reality, Lu Yi thought about it carefully. Not to mention Ma Bin's side, just Mount Fengsuan alone had more than 10 Rizhao backing him. If he really needed someone to guide him in his cultivation, Su Yuqing alone would be enough. There was no need for him to become a disciple of another Rizhao. But Julian had already said this, and it was out of goodwill. If he rejected her now, wouldn't she be angry? It was a good thing to become Sunshine's disciple, but correspondingly, there would be some restrictions, especially when Ma Bin was coming. You have concerns? Julian instantly saw through Lu Ye's thoughts. Lu Yi thought for a moment and said, Senior, please forgive me. The Three-World Island has many grievances with Guardian Yuan Du Senior and Guardian Yuan Du are both Sunshine's disciples in the Vientiane galaxy. If this junior really becomes your disciple, Guardian Yuan Du, Julian sneered. If you really become my disciple, he won't dare to have any ideas. These words were very domineering. Lu Yi was slightly aware of Julian's power. No hurry to reply. When you have thought it through, you can tell me, Julian said slowly. Thank you, Senior. Lu Yi breathed a sigh of relief. If Julian really wanted him to reply now, he could only accept his fate. After all, becoming Sunshine's disciple was not a bad thing. If Senior has no other instructions, this junior will take his leave. Lu Yi raised his eyes and looked at her carefully. Go. Julian waved her hand. Lu Yi turned and left. Suddenly, a voice came from behind him. Have you found the person you are looking for? Who? Lu Yi was stunned for a moment, then reacted. Julian should be asking about Ban Ci. Last time in the Carbell world, he asked Julian about this. Not yet. Lu Yi shook his head. Then take your time. You will find him eventually. Lu Yi stood in place, looking a little lost. After confirming that Julian had nothing else to say, he left. Vientiane Island, in the Guardian Palace, Yuan Du's eyes were gloomy. It had been a few years since the battle between Three-World Island and Zixian. Although Zixian had taken back her own top-grade spiritual island, she had suffered heavy losses. Because of this, Zixian had completely cut off all contact with Yuan Du. This was obviously Zixian's higher-ups expressing their dissatisfaction. If not for Yuan Du's secret instigation, Zixian would not have encountered such a disaster. In the end, she lost her spiritual island, and Yu Yao's people were all killed. Her reputation was greatly damaged. Three-World Island was the main culprit, but Yuan Du could not escape responsibility. As a result, Yuan Du no longer had a decent spiritual island to rely on. Originally, he had Baiwei and Zixian. But now, he only had the title of guardian, but he could not reap any benefits from it. Yuan Du could not do anything about Zixian's actions. He could only pour all his hatred on Three-World Island and Lu Yi. Calculating the time, He Yun should have reached Lu Ye's hometown. If Sunshine attacked, such a realm would not be able to stop him. When the news spread, Lu Yi would be devastated, right? But this was not enough. From his perspective, as long as Three-World Island did not fall, his reputation would not be restored. Therefore, no matter what, he had to destroy Three-World Island and kill Lu Yi. He already had a detailed plan, and this time, he had a good reason to attack. As a result, even if he attacked personally, it would not be considered breaking the rules of the Vientiane Sea. If Sunshine attacked, even a top-grade spiritual island would not be able to stop him. But he did not make a move. Because of an accident, his plan was disrupted. Chailing Realm's Jiu Yan had entered Three-World Island and had not left. This made him very vexed. Although his plan had a good reason, it could not withstand too much verification. At most, it could be considered a suspicious point. If Jiu Yan was not there, he only needed to confirm this suspicious point. However, with Jiu Yan around, things would not be so easy to handle. If Jiu Yan wanted to get to the bottom of it, what could he use to confront her? He did not want to go for wool and come home shorn. Therefore, what he needed to consider now was how to get Jiu Yan to leave Three-World Island. End of chapter. Chapter 1975. It would be best if Jiu Yan could leave the Wanxiang galaxy. Otherwise, Rizhao's speed was too fast. Once he received the news, It would not take much effort for him to rush over from Jia. At that time, he could quickly take action and destroy the three-world island. Even if Jiu Yin found out later, she would be powerless. As long as the three-world island was destroyed, not only would he gain a ready-made top-level spiritual island, but he would also gain control of a channel to contact the mermaid clan. He had searched the souls of a few of the three-world islands' constellations before. How could he not know about the existence of the mermaid clan? They were an extremely rare race. If he could control them, it would be a huge fortune. Not to mention, the mermaid clan lived under the Wanxiang Sea, which was a foreign land in the galaxy since ancient times. There was the magical Tianluo Palace there, and there was a huge spiritual jade mine there. Therefore, in his eyes, the three-world island represented not only the value of a top-level spiritual island, but also more than its apparent value. He did not mention this secret to anyone. After thinking about it, Yuan Du felt that calling an old friend was a good idea. It just so happened that he and Jiu Yin had a mutual friend, Rizhao from another galaxy. If he had something to ask, Jiu Yin should give him face. After deciding on the plan, it was time to carry it out. On the three-world island, in the alchemy room, Lu Yi came to visit his second senior sister. Although she no longer needed to make pills to maintain the livelihood of the island, she still stayed in the alchemy room. She still needed to make a lot of spiritual pills outside of cultivation. These spiritual pills would not be sold outside. They were used by her family. After chatting for a while, Lu Yi suddenly remembered something. Where's Yaya? When he left that year, he had entrusted Yaya to Shui Yuan. However, when he returned this time, he did not see any trace of the little girl. There seemed to be no trace of her in the entire three-world island. He could not help but feel puzzled. Shui Yuan said, Yaya is at the mermaid clan's territory. She seems to like the environment there. Once she went there and did not come back. I went to see her once. She was very happy there, so I did not care about her anymore. Lu Yi understood. Speaking of which, he had to go to the mermaid clan's territory. When Ma Bin came back, he would have to borrow their spiritual jade mine. No matter what, he had to greet the mermaid clan. Moreover, Luan Xiao and Miao Yin had both been promoted to Sunshine, so he really should go and congratulate them. After a short while, Lu Yi took back her blue sea snail from second senior sister and opened the door to the mermaid tribe's territory. His figure entered the door and appeared outside the Tianluo Palace in the next instant. After a while, Lu Yi finally saw Yin Miao and Luan Xiao. On the surface, the two women didn't seem to have changed much, but the unconcealable aura of sunshine on their bodies showed their powerful cultivation. This was normal. After all, they had just advanced not long ago, and the two of them had not stabilized their cultivation for the time being. After a period of time, they would be able to freely withdraw and release their auras. Both Luan Xiao and Smoky Miao were very happy and grateful to Lu Yi. Yin Miao's gratitude was natural. If Lu Yi hadn't helped her get rid of the bloodline curse poison, she wouldn't have been able to reach Sunshine. Now, not only had her cultivation improved greatly, but she was also no longer troubled by the bloodline curse poison. She could leave the Wanxiang Sea at any time. If it weren't for the living environment in the mermaid tribe's territory, the entire tribe would have considered moving. As for Luan Xiao, if she had stayed in the Yuluo realm, she wouldn't have been able to reach Sunshine either, because there wasn't such a good cultivation environment and abundant cultivation resources. Other things aside, she had taken a lot of supreme-grade soul-refining pills over the years. Both women were the first and only sunshine of their tribe. Now that they had made the great leap, it was as if they had been reborn. Lu Yi congratulated the two women, and then looked at Yin Miao. Great Elder, I have a request. Yin Miao smiled. Junior brother, you can say whatever you want. Don't say request. Our tribe is where we are today, because of Junior brother's help. If there's anything you like in our tribe, feel free to take it. Lu Yi nodded. It's like this. I have an elder who was injured in a fight with someone a few days ago. He briefly explained Ma Bin's situation. He didn't mention Ma Bin's identity, nor did he mention anything about the Taoist Foundation. After all, he didn't know anything about it. He only said that he wanted to borrow the spiritual jade vein here to heal his injury. Yin Miao nodded and agreed. Although the mermaid clan respected the queen, she was still young. Thus, Yin Miao had always been in charge of the clan's affairs. There was no need to report such trivial matters to the queen. Lu Yi also vaguely mentioned that the elder had a high cultivation level. He should be at the peak of the Sunshine Realm. He asked Yin Miao and Wan Xiao to take good care of him. He might be able to guide them on their future cultivation path. The two women were overjoyed. This was undoubtedly what they wanted the most right now. Lu Yi wanted to ask Wan Xiao about her future plans. After all, she had already reached the Sunshine Realm. There was no point for her to stay in the Wanxiang Sea. Moreover, she couldn't show her face in public. She could return to the Yuluo Galaxy and take charge of the Yuluo realm. But seeing her expectant look, he didn't ask. While they were talking, a petite figure suddenly rushed over. Along the way, she let out a string of bell-like laughter. Then, she threw herself into Lu Ye's arms. "Daddy!" Her little head rubbed against Lu Ye's chest. Lu Yi hugged Yaya and patted her head. "Why are you here? It's fun here." Yaya raised her head and smiled at Lu Yi. Lu Yi also raised his head and looked at Bai Lu, who had rushed over behind Yaya. Ghost was with Bai Lu. It seemed that Bai Lu had been taking care of Yaya all this time. Otherwise, they wouldn't be together so coincidentally. Bai Lu was still the same. She didn't change much. When she saw Lu Yi, she smiled gently. "Senior brother." Lu Yi nodded. "Sorry to trouble you." Ghost looked at him with disdain. "If you know it's trouble, then hurry up and take the doll away." During this time, Bai Lu had been taking care of Yaya and didn't have time to cultivate with her. This made her very unhappy. Yaya, who was in Lu Ye's arms, suddenly turned her head and glanced at Ghost. Ghost couldn't help but shrink her neck and hide behind Bai Lu. She couldn't tell what was wrong with Lu Ye's daughter. She only instinctively felt that this little girl was not normal. After all, from her appearance, this little girl didn't show any signs of cultivation. But if she really didn't show any signs of cultivation, how could she appear in a place like this? Moreover, she seemed to have suffered a loss at the hands of the other party once, but she couldn't remember the specific situation. This matter was very strange. One had to know that she was now Yu Yao. Means that could interfere with her memories and thoughts were not ordinary. It had been a long time since Lu Yi had come to the mermaid clan. Yin Miao immediately set up a banquet. Firstly, it was to entertain Lu Yi. Secondly, it was to celebrate her and Wan Xiao's marriage to Jin Rizhao. The entire Huangluo palace was full of joy. Lu Yi stayed at the mermaid clan for a few days, mainly to wait for the interval between the blue sea snails to be used. After the banquet, he went to the place where Hu Pu was and stayed by her side. Several years had already passed, but Hua Xiai still showed no signs of awakening. Lu Yi couldn't help but worry. Ever since he started cultivating, this was the first time he had experienced what it meant to be afraid. He was afraid that Hua Xiai would remain in this sealed state forever, never to wake up. He talked to himself and told Hua Xiai a lot of things. It didn't matter if he didn't get a response. A few days later, Lu Yi left. He originally wanted to take Yaya with him. After all, it wasn't good for her to stay at the mermaid clan. Unfortunately, Yaya didn't want to go, and with Bai Lu's support, Lu Yi could only let her go. When he returned to the three-world island, Lu Yi left a precious blood clone to guard the island. His main body, on the other hand, left silently until he reached a remote and uninhabited place. Only then did he find an opportunity to dive into the sea and begin his cultivation. His current cultivation level was indeed at the late stage of Yu Yao's, but he hadn't cultivated properly since his breakthrough. Now that he couldn't solve the problem of his source origin quickly, he could only cultivate first. After several years of accumulation, his cultivation level at the late stage of Yu Yao had already stabilized. The next few days were calm and peaceful. The three-world island was as prosperous as before. Nothing special happened. Lu Yi was also immersed in his cultivation and didn't pay attention to the outside world. It wasn't until 2 months later that the precious blood clone, who was guarding the three-world island, received news and hurried out. As expected, he saw a familiar figure in the guest hall. Fellow Taoist Jew. Lu Yi cupped his fists. Fellow Taoist Lu. Zhu Yuan returned the greeting. He didn't see Ma Bin, but Lu Yi knew that Ma Bin had come. Ma Bin seemed to have a special ability that allowed him to possess other people's bodies. Back then, Lu Yi had seen him plunge into Zhu Yuan's body and disappear. It was thanks to this method that Ma Bin was able to leave safely under the heavy blockade of the Vientiane galaxy. As per fellow Taoist's invitation, this Zhu has come, Zhu Yuan said with a deep meaning. Lu Yi didn't dare to show the slightest change in expression. When he invited Ma Bin, he didn't expect Juyin to come to the three-world island. Now that Juyin was here, he didn't know if she was secretly paying attention to something. If there was something strange, she might notice it. Follow me, Lu Yi called out, and took the lead to walk out. Although Zhu Yuan didn't understand what he meant, he still followed. Just as the two of them moved, Lu Yi felt a figure flash in front of him. Then a fragrance hit him. He looked up and saw a plump figure standing in front of him. Her face was surrounded by light, so he couldn't see her face clearly. Zhu Yuan was even more shocked. He quickly put on a defensive posture. Lu Yi blinked and hurriedly bowed. Greetings, Senior Juyin. Senior, what's the matter? Juyin didn't answer. Even though Lu Yi couldn't see her face clearly, he could still feel that Juyin was looking at Zhu Yuan at this moment. Was Rizhao's perception so sharp? Lu Yi was secretly shocked. Juyin couldn't have come here for no reason. She obviously sensed something. After thinking about it carefully, Lu Yi felt that something was wrong. If Rizhao's perception was so sharp, then Ma Bin couldn't have escaped from the Vientiane galaxy so smoothly. It seemed that either Juyin was strong enough, or Ma Bin was injured, causing his aura to leak out. End of chapter. Chapter 1976. Jiu Yan's sudden appearance left Lu Yi unperturbed, but Zhu Yuan turned pale with fright. He hurriedly looked at Lu Yi. Lu Yi hurriedly said. This is Senior Jiu Yan from Che Lingjia. She's been cultivating on the island recently. Zhu Yuan had traveled the 10,000 manifestation sea before, so he had naturally heard of Jiu Yan's name. He hurriedly bowed. Greetings, Senior Jiu Yan. Jiu Yan's silent pressure not only made Lu Yi nervous, but also made Zhu Yuan nervous. Beads of sweat dripped from his forehead. At one point, Lu Yi even felt that Jiu Yan's magic power was about to go berserk. But for some reason, she managed to suppress it. Then she slowly turned her head and looked at Lu Yi. Your friend? Lu Yi hurriedly replied. Yes. Why are you here? Jiu Yan asked again. Brother Zhu wants to buy something, but he's not familiar with the 10,000 manifestations sea, so he asked me to take him to the 10,000 manifestations island. He casually made up a story. Jiu Yan didn't speak. After a while, her figure suddenly disappeared. Only her voice could be heard. Let's go. Yes, Lu Yi hurriedly replied. After a short while, he took Zhu Yuan to the 10,000 manifestations island and entered the 10,000 manifestations chamber of commerce. Half a day later, the two left the 10,000 manifestations chamber of commerce and flew toward the 10,000 manifestations sea. When they reached a desolate star and entered a secret place, Lu Yi set up a formation to conceal them. Only then did Zhu Yuan let out a long sigh of relief. Senior, you can come out now, Lu Yi softly called out. A shadow flashed out of Zhu Yuan's body and condensed into Ma Bin's figure. Compared to a few months ago, Ma Bin's current state seemed to be worse. Even his face was slightly pale. Juyin is really something. Ma Bin's face was full of admiration. He looked at Lu Yi. How did you get involved with her? Lu Yi smiled bitterly. She's the backer of the island. She suddenly came to the island and occupied the spirit jade mine to cultivate. Did she discover you? I sense something, but I'm not sure. Moreover, she doesn't know it's me. Otherwise, she wouldn't have held back, Ma Bin said. Since the spirit jade mine has been seized by her, it's my fate. It's fine. Lu Yi understood Ma Bin's meaning and immediately said, although we can't use the island's spirit jade mine for the time being, there are other places to go. There's a place to go. Ma Bin's face was filled with astonishment, but he soon remembered that Lu Yi had indeed mentioned a third mineral lode. Senior, please wait a moment. After a while, a spirit inscription suddenly flashed in front of Lu Yi and disappeared, followed by another Lu Yi appearing out of thin air. Surprisingly, it was the master who had received the news from his doppelganger and had hurried over. He raised his hand and recalled the precious blood clone. Zhu Yuan was dumbfounded. Even Ma Bin showed an interested expression. What kind of doppelganger technique is this? Even he hadn't been able to see any flaws. Although his strength had been damaged, he had lived for so many years, and his eyesight was still there. Lu Ye's move was truly unexpected. It's just a small trick, not worth mentioning. Lu Yi didn't know how to explain that this was the blood race's precious blood doppelganger, so he casually changed the topic. He took out the blue sea snail and blew it. Soon, a door appeared in front of him. "Senior, please follow me." Saying so, Lu Yi took the lead and walked in, followed by Ma Bin and Zhu Yuan. A moment later, in front of the heavenly spiral palace, Zhu Yuan was dumbfounded as he looked at the merpeople walking around. He never thought that one day he would be able to see such a rare race. After all, according to the rumors, the merpeople should have been extinct long ago. Although Ma Bin was surprised, he was still able to keep his composure. But when he learned that he was actually under the 10,000 Elephant Sea, his calmness turned into astonishment. He had never known that the 10,000 Elephant Sea was such a scene. Wan Xiao and Yin Miao came to greet him in person. Lu Yi had already greeted them before, so there was no need to say anything more. "Senior, please rest assured and recuperate here. This portal won't last long, so I have to hurry back. Our island is in contact with this place. If Senior needs anything, just let someone tell me, and I will prepare it for Senior." Ma Bin looked at Lu Yi with a complicated expression. "You are so considerate." Back then, when Lu Yi learned about the recent situation in the 9 regions, he was gratified that his homeland still existed, but he never thought that he would have any intersection with his homeland. But he never thought that when he was most trapped and helpless, it was a junior from his homeland who solved his worries and solved his difficulties, and gave him the hope and possibility of making a comeback. "Senior, you are too polite." Lu Yi nodded and looked at Yin Miao and Wan Xiao. "I will have to trouble you here." "Don't worry." Yin Miao smiled and watched Lu Yi step into the portal and disappear again. After settling Ma Bin down, Lu Yi finally had one less worry. However, Ma Bin's injury was a wound to his Dao foundation. Although he could use the spirit jade vein, he was afraid that it wouldn't be able to recover in a short period of time. It should take a long time for him to recover. Lu Yi only needed to do one thing, and that was to cultivate. First, he would raise his cultivation to the peak of the Moon Jade realm. When his source origin was polished to perfection, he would be able to condense the flower of Qi and advance to the Sunshine realm. The precious blood avatar returned to the 3-world island. Jiu Yin did not appear again, nor did she ask anything. It seemed that Ma Bin was right. Jiu Yin vaguely sensed something, but she could not make a specific judgment. That was why she asked Zhu Yuan to buy something and leave quickly. It was not that there was no sunshine in the Wanxiang Sea, but it would not stay for too long. A short break would not be a problem. Of course, the precondition was that when Luo Xia from the Daluo galaxy escorted many cultivators here, he was immediately targeted by sunshine from the Daluo galaxy and summoned to talk to him. Even so, Luo Xia did not stay in the Wanxiang Sea for too long. That time, he seemed to have stayed in the Wanxiang Sea for less than a month. Time passed. Another year passed in the blink of an eye. Under the Wanxiang Sea, Lu Yi slowly opened his eyes. His cultivation had reached its limit. The improvement of the quality of his source origin had greatly increased his cultivation efficiency. That was why he could make such great gains in just 1 year. Generally speaking, when a Yu Yao reached his level, they would consider preparing to advance to sunshine. However, this barrier was not easy to break through. Wan Xiao and Yin Miao in the past, He Baichuan, Yu Shicheng Xian, and the others were all stuck at this barrier. In the universe, countless Yu Yao had failed to break through this barrier. The cultivation of the upper 3 realms was the cultivation of essence, energy, and spirit. Sunshine corresponded to spirit. Therefore, Yu Yao not only needed their cultivation to reach the standard, but also their divine sense to reach the standard. This was the fundamental reason why supreme-grade divine refining pills were so popular. Wan Xiao and Yin Miao were able to advance smoothly largely because they had persisted in consuming supreme-grade divine refining pills all these years. However, the Yu Yao of the Daliao galaxy had such convenience. Other Yu Yao did not. They could only try their best to find some spirit pills or treasures that could improve their divine sense cultivation. However, if they ate too many spirit pills, unless they were supreme grade, they would not benefit them. It was foreseeable that on the Daliao galaxy, He Baichuan and the others would have an easier time advancing to sunshine than the other Yu Yao. This was because they were currently being supplied with supreme-grade divine refining pills. However, this did not mean that they would definitely advance. This was also related to their previous accumulation. However, on Lu Ye's side, a disappointed expression appeared on his face. This was because when Yu Yao's divine sense cultivation had reached its limit, he could clearly feel a layer of shackles binding his body. This layer was the biggest barrier for all Yu Yao. He felt that he only needed to exert a little force, and he could break through. This was definitely not an illusion. It was the truth. In other words, if he wanted to advance to sunshine, he could do so now. This undoubtedly meant that this layer of shackles did not pose any hindrance to him. In fact, if he thought about it carefully, this was only natural. Back when he was cultivating in the 9 states, he was only at the true lake realm. However, he had already nurtured his soul avatar in Spirit Sea. Compared to ordinary cultivators, his divine sense had always been stronger. After that, he had obtained a rainbow divine lotus in the Soul Tribe's ancestral land. Since then, his divine sense had been constantly nourished and strengthened. So many years had passed. Even if he had not consumed any supreme-grade divine refining pills, the rainbow divine lotus was still much more useful than simply consuming spirit pills. The strength of his divine sense was enough to meet the requirements for advancing to sunshine. Once his divine sense was strong enough, and his divine sense had accumulated enough cultivation, the shackles were no longer shackles. They could be easily broken through. However, Lu Yi naturally could not advance to sunshine just like that. If he had only wanted to increase his divine sense cultivation, he would have done so many years ago. All these years, he had been searching for resources to refine his divine sense cultivation. His various experiences in the Azura realm had brought him very close to success. If he gave up now, all his previous efforts would have been for naught. Thus, no matter what, he still had to condense the flower of qi. Unfortunately, over the past year, even though the 3-world island had increased the bounty on his head, he still had very little to show for it. So far, he had only obtained a single treasure that could refine one's divine sense cultivation. Lu Yi wanted to go to the carriage bell realm. Back then, he had obtained a spoil of war from Zixian. It was a treasure of this type. In the end, he had given it to Aunt Yu. However, by the time he had found out, it was already too late. However, after thinking about it, he decided against it. Normally, Yu Yao would refine such a treasure as soon as she obtained it. Aunt Yu was not someone who lacks spirit jades. She would not keep it. After all, it was something that he had given away. How could he take it back? Based on his current needs for such a treasure and his own judgment, if he could only obtain one each year, it would take him at least 20 to 30 years to achieve his goal. After returning from the sea, Lu Yi was depressed. Where should he go to find it? He could not help but think of the Azura realm. Sure, the leader of the heavenly Azura tribe, had advanced too quickly. If he had advanced a year or two later, and if the Azura realm had closed a year or two later, he would not have been in such an awkward situation. This was the 10,000 Elephant Sea, where countless cultivators from different galaxies gathered. It could be said to be the center of the universe. If he could not find what he needed here, where could he find it? End of chapter. Chapter 1977. Just as he was feeling depressed, his expression suddenly changed, and he hurriedly rushed off in a certain direction. He didn't know why Jiu Yin had summoned him. A moment later, inside the spirit jade mine, Lu Yi bowed. "Greetings, senior." Jiu Yin was still cultivating, but she didn't make Lu Yi wait. Instead, she directly asked, "Have you considered the matter from last time?" "What?" Lu Yi was stunned. The matter from last time was about Zhu Yuan? However, he quickly realized that Jiu Yin was probably asking about accepting him as a disciple. He didn't know how to answer, because he hadn't considered this matter at all. However, it wouldn't be good if he rejected her directly. It seems you're unwilling. Jiu Yin snorted softly. She could already tell what he was thinking. Lu Yi apologized. Senior, please forgive me. It's just that. No need to say anything more. Since you're unwilling, I won't force you. Jiu Yin interrupted him, seemingly a little annoyed. On the other hand, your cultivation seems to have made significant progress. Lu Yi hurriedly said, I've been cultivating in seclusion recently, and I've made some progress. Jiu Yin said, Yu Yao and Rizhao are only one step apart, but in reality, they're worlds apart. Once you cross over, you'll enter a whole new world. However, if you can't, you'll only be wasting your life away. You're currently at a critical juncture, so you must remember to guard against arrogance and rashness. Try not to fight with others, and don't get injured easily. Yes, Lu Yi replied. He suddenly felt that he might have misunderstood Jiu Yin. She didn't seem to hate him at all. Her words were clearly the concern of a senior toward a junior. I heard that you're looking for treasures that can improve the quality of your art source? Jiu Yin suddenly changed the topic. Three World Island had been sparing no effort in offering rewards for such treasures, so it was impossible for Jiu Yin not to have heard of them. That's right. Lu Ye's expression changed. Does Senior have a way? Jiu Yin didn't answer. She only said, Of course, the higher the quality of your art source, the better. However, everyone has their own limits, so it's fine as long as your art source's quality is sufficient. There's no need to pursue it too much. Lu Yi naturally understood this principle. An art source's main function was to convert the spiritual energy that a cultivator refined into magic power during cultivation. It was something unique to Yu Yao. If a cultivator's efficiency in refining spiritual energy was limited, then no matter how high the grade of the source was, it would be meaningless, because there would not be enough spiritual energy to be converted. Therefore, it was fine as long as he had enough source energy. But Lu Yi didn't just want to have enough. He also wanted to polish his spiritual source to perfection. This wasn't something that he could tell Jiu Yin. He could only obediently say, Junior understands. It's good that you understand. As Jiu Yin spoke, she flicked her finger and an item flew over. Lu Yi instinctively grabbed it. However, before he could inspect it, Jiu Yin's voice rang out. Go on. Cultivate well, and break through as soon as possible. Lu Yi blinked, then bowed and left. Only after leaving the spirit jade mine and returning to his residence did Lu Yi have a chance to check what Jiu Yin had given him. It was a storage ring, but when Lu Yi checked the contents of the ring, he couldn't help being pleasantly surprised. This was because there were a total of 8 treasures in the ring that could temper the quality of one source. According to the rules of the Azura field, these 8 treasures were worth at least an Azura seal. What did Jiu Yin mean by this? She had called him over to give him pointers, and said that it was fine as long as his source energy was of sufficient quality. It was as if she was trying to persuade him not to waste his energy and time on this. However, she had also given him these 4 treasures. Lu Yi couldn't figure out what was going on. As a member of the Sunshine sect who had lived for who knew how many years, it was normal for her to have such treasures. But why would she give them to him? This was what Lu Yi couldn't understand. Aunt Yu should want them. Not to mention Aunt Yu, Chu Shen had already advanced to Yu Yao. He also wanted them. Why would Jiu Yin give them to him? If it was because of Chu Shen, it didn't make sense for him to love the house and its crow. After thinking about it, Lu Yi felt that there was only one explanation. Whether it was Aunt Yu or Chu Shen, the quality of their source energy was sufficient. The treasures in Jiu Yan's hands were completely unnecessary. She also knew that he had asked the 3 World Island to put a bounty on such treasures, so she gave them to him. But no matter what, this gift from Jiu Yan was exactly what Lu Yi wanted. He silently remembered this favor in his heart. Now that the gap between their strength and status was too big, there was no need to talk about repayment. He would think about it in the future. After happily refining these treasures, Lu Yi keenly sensed that there were some unusual changes in his source energy. It was as if it wasn't too far away from reaching the Great Circle stage. He carefully sensed it and confirmed that it was not an illusion. His source energy was indeed not far from perfection. This made him pleasantly surprised. It seemed that his previous estimate was somewhat different from the actual situation. Based on the current situation, he only needed 2 or 3 more sets of treasures to complete the task. 2 or 3 treasures, it was really not much. If he was lucky, he might be able to achieve it in one day. Even if he was unlucky, there was still hope for him to achieve it in 2 or 3 years. Now that his cultivation was enough, and he had fulfilled all the requirements for breaking through to the Sunshine Sect, all that was left was to condense the qi refining flour. Lu Yi was in a good mood, and was looking forward to it. On the island of versatility, Yuan Du was guarding the palace. A gust of evil wind swept over, and He Yun revealed himself. Yuan Du sensed something, and immediately came out to greet him. When he saw the figure in He Yun's hand, he nodded slightly and said, "Fellow Taoist, He Yun is quite fast. You caught her so quickly." He Yun threw the figure in his hand to the ground in front of him. "It's just catching Yu Yao. What's the trouble?" That being said, this Yu Yao was not someone he had casually caught. At this moment, Yu Yao was lying on the ground with a slender figure. Her exposed skin was blood red, and her 2 pointy ears indicated that she was a blood tribe member. At this moment, this blood tribe member Yu Yao had been sealed by He Yun and couldn't move at all. Her face was full of fear and uneasiness. "So what do we do next?" He Yun asked Yuan Du with a gloomy expression. Not only had Zi Xian suffered heavy losses, but he had also listened to Yuan Du's nonsense and made a trip to the 9 states. In the end, even the avatar he had spent 3,000 years to create had died there. How could he not take revenge for such a great grudge? Moreover, unlike Yuan Du, he had recognized the 9 states and was still thinking about the supreme treasure of the starry sky, the Tao Tree. His avatar hadn't found any traces of the Tao Tree in the 9 states. In addition, he had previously inquired about Lu Yi, so he boldly speculated that this Lu Yi might have obtained the inheritance of the Tao Tree. Otherwise, how could his cultivation have improved so quickly? This was a very suspicious point. Since it was suspicious, he couldn't let it go. With this speculation, he naturally came to the 10,000 Elephant Sea to take down Lu Yi. In this regard, he and Yuan Du were like-minded. The only difference was that Yuan Du was purely venting his anger for the sake of his own dignity. But he had other motives. He had no choice but to join forces with Yuan Du if he wanted to take down Lu Yi in the 10,000 Elephant Sea. He couldn't avoid the 10,000 Elephant Galaxy. Therefore, he could only cooperate with Yuan Du with Yuan Du's help. The resistance would be much lower. He didn't have any other requests. He only wanted Lu Yi to be handed over to him. He told Yuan Du that he wanted to avenge the dead Zixian demon cultivator and bring him back to the Zixian demon planet to sacrifice to the demon god. Yuan Du didn't suspect anything and immediately agreed. In any case, as long as he could take down the 3-world island and the passage to the mermaid clan's territory, there was no harm in handing Lu Yi over to He Yun. He believed that He Yun wouldn't let Lu Yi live. Moreover, Zi Xian had indeed suffered great losses because of him. Yuan Du knew that if he wanted to maintain his relationship with Zi Xian, he couldn't refuse He Yun's small request. Both of them had their own motives, so of course they hit it off. Moreover, from their point of view, the 2 Rikas joining forces to plot against Yu Yao and the top-grade spiritual island behind her was like pinching a conch with 10 fingers. No accidents would happen. Half a year ago, He Yun came once and reached a verbal agreement with Yuan Du then. Yuan Du asked him to capture a member of the blood tribe. He Yun didn't know why, but since it was a cooperation he didn't refuse. He had also worked hard to capture Yu Yao in the blood tribe's domain. Because of this, he had been hunted down by a few Rikas for a month. Next, we just need to wait. Yuan Du smiled slightly, as if victory was already in his hands. As long as Jiu Yan left the 3-world island, then he could act without worry. Jiu Yan's presence there made him wary. As for how to get Jiu Yan to leave the 3-world island, he had already planned for a long time. He believed that in a few days, the news would reach Jiu Yan's ears. Days passed by. On this day, in the 3-world island's garrison area, a group of people sat cross-legged in front of Lu Ye's bamboo house. They surrounded him in the middle. Lu Yi couldn't raise his cultivation level, and he couldn't find any treasures to improve the quality of his spiritual power source. He seemed to have nothing to do. He wasn't willing to participate in the management of the three-world island. So he simply spread the news that anyone who had any questions about cultivation could ask him at any time. His original intention was to help the island's cultivators solve some of their problems and help them grow better. However, after the news was spread, many people came to him every day to ask for help. Gradually, more and more people gathered, and gradually, it became the current scale. Not only people from the Qingli Dao world and the Yukong world came to look for him. Many seniors from the 9 states came as well. Even the sect master came to ask him a few questions. Lu Yi answered all of their questions carefully, and many cultivators learned a lot. While it was bustling here, Lu Yi's expression suddenly changed. He turned his head and looked in a direction with a puzzled expression. Half a day later, the crowd dispersed. Lu Yi went to look for Chu Shun. Why did Senior Jiu Yan suddenly leave? He clearly felt Jiu Yan's aura flash past. She should have left the three-world island. End of chapter. Chapter 1978. Jiu Yan didn't tell Lu Yi anything before she left, so there was no reason for her to tell him. Therefore, he came to Chu Shun's place to ask. Perhaps Chu Shun would know something. Sure enough, Chu Shun knew the situation. Mother said an old friend called her and asked her to go to another galaxy to help. She'll be back soon. I see. Lu Yi understood. Jiu Yan was visiting a friend. However, as Rizhao, it was normal to have friends from other galaxies. Even Lu Yi himself knew many people from other galaxies. Therefore, Lu Yi didn't think too much about it. After chatting with Chu Shun for a while, he left. But for some reason, as Jiu Yan left, Lu Yi suddenly had a feeling of unease, as if something bad was about to happen. This feeling made him secretly vigilant. When one's cultivation had reached such a level, sometimes the sudden inspiration might be a kind of omen. In the bamboo building, Lu Yi thought about it for a long time, but he did not find anything wrong or worthy of attention. This was the Myriad Sea. As long as the rules of the Myriad Sea were not broken, then with the foundation of the three-world island and the reputation he had gained through killing, he could rest easy. After thinking for a long time, he reached into his pocket and took out the dice of fate. He was proud of this thing. He had only rolled it once. The other times were when he entered various training scenarios, and the dice of fate appeared on its own. However, based on his previous experiences, the dice of fate lived up to its name. The divinations it rolled were closely related to his future situation, to a large extent. Therefore, Lu Yi felt that it wasn't the dice of fate that controlled his fate, but the future's misfortune. If it weren't for the palpitations this time, he wouldn't have used it so casually. However, he couldn't care too much at this moment. After thinking for a while, he threw the dice in front of him. With a rumble, the small die froze. A dim light flashed and turned into the word how. Before Lu Yi could take a closer look, the word how turned into a dim light again and entered his forehead. Lu Yi frowned. This how was obviously not a good sign. This undoubtedly showed that his palpitations weren't for no reason. Something could really happen. However, since it was how and not a misfortune, then it didn't seem to be a big deal. Or perhaps it was not too dangerous. But the process might be a little bumpy? But no matter what, this made Lu Yi cautious. After thinking for a while, he got up and walked towards the pill room. He found Second Senior Sister and talked to her. Second Senior Sister didn't ask anything, and just nodded repeatedly. After leaving Second Senior Sister's place, Lu Yi checked the talent tree. Under the illumination of the flames, a gray mist rose. It was obvious that the mysterious power of the dice of fate was being burned away by the talent tree. At this rate, it would be completely burned away in less than 2 or 3 days. He calmed down a little. In the blink of an eye, another 2 days passed. On this day, Lu Yi was answering the questions of some cultivators when he suddenly felt a brilliant aura rapidly approaching from a certain direction. He hurriedly raised his head to look in that direction and frowned. His sudden impulse had really come true. But what he hadn't expected was that it would actually be that old bastard, Yuan Du. Moreover, it happened to be less than 2 days after Juyan left. Was this a coincidence? Lu Yi didn't think so. He wasn't the only one who felt the radiant aura. Many of the Yu Yao on the island also felt it. Immediately, divine thoughts were transmitted from all over the island. After a brief exchange, Lu Yi got up and headed in Yuan Du's direction. At the same time, following his order, the defensive formation of the entire three-world island was activated to the extreme. Yuan Du had come personally, so it was obvious that he didn't come with good intentions. There were some things that he had to guard against. A moment later, inside the defensive formation, Lu Yi and the other island lords gathered behind him. They stood in the air and looked in the direction Yuan Du had come from. This old bastard didn't hide his radiant aura at all, but his speed wasn't fast. In fact, it could even be said that he was very slow. Therefore, along the way, he attracted the attention of countless cultivators. They didn't know what Yuan Du was doing. However, when they realized that Yuan Du was actually heading towards the famous three-world island, many cultivators showed interest and followed him from afar. Many cultivators knew about the grudge between the three-world island and Yuan Du. However, as the protector of the 10,000 creation sea, Yuan Du had to strictly abide by the rules of the 10,000 creation sea. Therefore, even if he was radiant, he couldn't do anything to the three-world island as long as they didn't violate any rules. Now that Yuan Du had suddenly pointed his sword at the three-world island, it was obvious that he was going to make a big move. Naturally, it made people curious. Junior brother Lu, this old bastard doesn't have good intentions. He Baichuan's face was full of worry. Of course, he understood Yuan Du's intentions. As radiant, he could have come quickly, but he chose to walk so slowly. He deliberately attracted attention and made people follow him. This was to create momentum. On one hand, it was to put pressure on the three-world island. On the other hand, it was to show others that he was fair and just. He had absolute confidence in himself. Therefore, no matter what he did, he would do it according to the rules of the 10,000 creation sea. No one would criticize him. News spread quickly in the 10,000 creation sea, especially regarding Radiant and the three-world island. Therefore, in just a moment, the entire 10,000 creation sea knew about what was going on here. Those close to the three-world island hurried over to take a look, while those far away also hurried over. Everyone realized that something big might happen today. The journey that should have taken only a dozen breaths took Yuan Du an incense stick's worth of time. When Yuan Du arrived at the three-world island, there was already a sea of people in all directions. Yuan Du didn't come alone. He had brought nearly 100 Yu Yao with him. Some of these Yu Yao belonged to the local star system's domain and were directly under Yuan Du's command. However, most of them were the guards of the major spiritual islands. For example, Lu Yi saw Giant Blade Island's Zhao Yunqi, the island master of Giant Blade Island, who had been taken advantage of twice by the three-world island, couldn't help but shrink his neck when he met Lu Ye's eyes. He was traumatized. This time, he didn't want to get involved in the matter against the three-world island. However, since Yuan Du had summoned him, he had to come. On the surface, it seemed that the three-world island had no power to resist since Yuan Du had personally come. However, Zhao Yunqi still felt uneasy. He had a feeling that things wouldn't go so smoothly. If Yuan Du failed, the Giant Blade Island would no longer have the qualifications to establish itself in the 10,000 creation sea. Although he knew that this was unlikely to happen, he was still worried. Zhao Yunqi wasn't the only Yu Yao guard summoned by Yuan Du. There were a few other Yao cultivators, who were obviously on Zixian's side. However, they were all new Yao cultivators, so Lu Yi didn't know any of them. As for the other Yu Yao, Lu Yi didn't know any of them either. As the Rizhao realm's guard, he had the right to summon the Yu Yao of the major spiritual islands to help him when he encountered some problems. Yuan Du had taken action this time to make a big deal out of this matter. He wanted to let the world know that he wasn't seeking personal revenge, but was standing on the side of righteousness. On one side, Rizhao had come in person with 100 Yu Yao cultivators following him. On the other side, there was only Lu Yi and a few others. The two sides were separated by a defensive formation and were less than 100 feet apart. Lu Yi looked at Yuan Du and said calmly, "What a powerful aura. I didn't know who had such a powerful aura. It turns out that it's guard Yuan Du who has come in person. I apologize for not going out to meet you. May I know the reason for your visit? Yuan Du only looked at him indifferently. Due to the angle, he seemed to be looking down at him from above. He didn't respond to Lu Yi's question at all. Obviously, he didn't think Lu Yi was qualified to talk to him. Beside him, Yuan Qing stepped forward and smiled at Lu Yi. Island Master Lu, we meet again. Back then, he had seen with his own eyes how Lu Yi killed Lionheart. His heart had palpitated for a long time. Lu Yi gave him a feeling of lawlessness. He even dared to offend Yuan. Yuan Cheng didn't get along well with Lu Yi. If Lu Yi wanted to kill him one day, how could he stop him? However, from today onwards, he didn't have to worry about anything. Yuan Qingzhen didn't know what Lu Yi was thinking. Was there a hole in his brain? How dare he offend Rizhao when he was trying to make a living on the Vientiane Sea? Yuan Qingzhen didn't know what Lu Yi was thinking. Fellow Taoist Yuan Cheng. Lu Yi turned to look at him. Yuan Cheng nodded and his expression turned serious. Island Master Lu, Lord Guard has come for an important matter. Therefore, I would like to ask Island Master Lu to open the defensive formation and let us in first. The defensive formation? Lu Yi tilted his head. That's unfortunate. A few days ago, the island's formation suddenly ran into some problems and can't be opened for the time being. Lord Guard, if you have something to say, you can say it here. In the face of Zhao Ri, the defensive formation might be a layer of protection, but how could Lu Yi casually open the formation to let others in? If he did, and the other party harbored ill intentions, Yuan Cheng would be powerless to resist. Moreover, from the other party's attitude, it was obvious he wasn't here to talk to him. The defensive formation can't be opened. Yuan Cheng's eyes twitched. He really didn't understand how Lu Yi could be so thick-skinned as to lie through his teeth. However, before he could say anything, Lu Yi said, "Or is there something the Lord Guard doesn't want to tell outsiders?" It was obvious that he was worried about Yuan Du and wanted to secretly play some tricks. Yuan Qing smiled. Of course not. That's good. It's rare for so many fellow Taoists to gather here today, so there are some things that need to be revealed in public and let everyone know the true face of some people. It was expected that the three-world island would close the formation, so Yuan Qing didn't care at all. As long as this matter was confirmed, the three-world island and Lu Yi would never be able to rise again. Bring him in. Yuan Qing suddenly waved his hand. In the next moment, Tu Yuyao escorted a figure to the front. Countless gazes gathered on the figure, and soon, cries of surprise rang out. Blood race. It's the blood race. Why did they bring a blood race member here? Could it be? Many people knew that there were blood race members hiding in the 10,000 Elephant Sea. However, the blood race members were very well hidden. Even Zhao Ri couldn't detect them unless he was at close range. Moreover, there weren't many blood race members hiding in the 10,000 Elephant Sea, and they hadn't stirred up much trouble. Most of them just quietly cultivated and collected some information. It was harmless, so no one paid them much attention. Chapter 1979. This Blood Clan member had obviously been tortured. His aura was weak, and his face was very pale. The insect and blood clans were hated by everyone in the galaxy. It would be fine if he didn't expose himself under normal circumstances. But in this situation, he knew that he would die without a doubt, so he had no intention of resisting at all. The 10,000 Elephant Sea naturally had their reasons for sparing his life. He only needed to cooperate a little later, and he would have a quick death. Under everyone's gaze, Yuan Cheng pointed at this Blood Clan member and explained with a smile. This bastard has been hiding in the 10,000 Elephant Sea for many years with evil intentions. A few days ago, the Lord Guardian discovered some clues and captured him. In fact, this Blood Clan member's origin was captured by He Yun from a Blood Clan realm. But outsiders didn't know, so Yuan Cheng naturally explained. The Lord Guardian asked around and found out that there is more than one Blood Clan member hiding in the 10,000 Elephant Sea. It's just that these Blood Clan members are proficient in the art of concealment and transformation, so ordinary people can't detect them. Many people nodded at his words. This was something that everyone knew, so they weren't surprised. Yuan Cheng's expression turned serious. The insect and blood clans are the most chaotic in the galaxy. The 10,000 Elephant Sea is the gathering place of various galaxies, the center of the galaxy. How can the blood clan be allowed to do as they please here? Unfortunately, ordinary methods can't find these hidden blood clan members. But, just because ordinary methods can't find them doesn't mean the blood clan can't find them themselves. At this point, he turned to look at the blood clan member with a cold expression. Don't you think so? The blood clan member immediately understood that it was time for him to cooperate. He didn't resist and said with a wooden expression, "That's right. My clan has a secret technique called the blood cry technique. When used, I can sense the presence of my clan members nearby." Right now, he only wanted to die quickly, so he was willing to cooperate with Yuan Du when the time came. He would choose the targets according to the agreement. The ones who died were humans anyway, so it wouldn't hurt him or the blood clan at all. In fact, he was quite happy to see the human race fight like this. It made him feel good to drag someone down with him before he died. The surrounding cultivators were in an uproar. Yuan Du's side had rushed to the three-world island with a blood clan member. More importantly, this blood clan member had said such words, which made the original fanciful thoughts become more and more suspicious. Could it be that the three-world island, that had risen to fame in recent years? Island Master Lu. Yuan Cheng looked at Lu Yi with a smile. I wonder if Island Master Lu has anything to say. Lu Ye's expression was calm. What do you want me to say? Yuan Cheng was a little disappointed. He had thought that he would see Lu Ye's flustered look. Who would have thought that this guy's temperament would be so calm? At this point, Yuan Du's purpose in bringing a blood clan member here was obvious. He wanted to identify Lu Yi as a blood clan member. However, both Yuan Du and Yuan Cheng knew that this was obviously a false accusation. But so what? As long as this blood clan member pointed out Lu Yi, they would have a reason to attack. When that time came, the three-world island wouldn't compromise. If the three-world island dared to resist, they would be accused. When Yuan Du attacked, no one would say anything. This was an overt scheme. And it was an overt scheme that couldn't be broken in the face of absolute strength. It was true that the Rizhao Guard wouldn't interfere in the battles between the major spiritual islands. But killing a blood clan member wasn't a problem. That was why Yuan Du wanted to find a way to get Jiu Yan away. Otherwise, as long as she was on the three-world island, this plan couldn't be carried out. If that was the case and Jiu Yan came to confront him personally, how could he defend himself? Jiu Yan's temper wasn't good. If she came back and attacked him directly, he would have a bump on his head. Now that Jiu Yan wasn't here, and the other guards didn't come out, he, Yuan Du, was the only one on the Vientiane Sea. Since Island Master Lu has nothing to say, then I'll say it. Yuan Cheng was still smiling. I've seen Island Master Lu fight from afar. Actually, I'm very curious about one thing. Since Island Master Lu is a weapon cultivator, how did you manage to cultivate such an exquisite blood Dao technique? Without giving Lu Yi a chance to speak, he raised his voice. Regardless of whether it was the battle against Bai Yu, or the attack on Zixian a few years ago, Island Master Lu's Blood Sea technique was amazing. That level of Blood Sea technique isn't like any other secret technique of the Blood Dao. It shouldn't be cultivated by a weapon cultivator. It would have been better if he didn't say this. Once he said this, many cultivators around frowned and fell into deep thought. Regardless of whether it was the battle against Bai Yu or Zixian, there were too many spectators. Lu Ye's Blood Sea technique was indeed impressive. Now that they thought about it, there seemed to be something wrong. Lu Yi of the Three-World Island was known as the #1 person under the Rizhao Guard. It was because he was a weapon cultivator that he killed his way through. After all, a person's energy was limited. Even those Dharma cultivators who specialized in Blood Dao secret techniques might not be able to display such a level of Blood Sea technique. However, a weapon cultivator was able to do it. This was indeed abnormal. Lu Yi blinked. It's true that I'm a weapon cultivator, but I'm also a Dharma cultivator, body cultivator, sword cultivator. What's the problem? Yuan Cheng was stunned by his words. I didn't expect you to be so shameless. Don't waste your breath on him. Yuan Du impatiently urged. If it weren't for the righteous side, he wouldn't have created such a troublesome situation. However, if the Rizhao guard personally made a move, he would have a good reason to do so. Therefore, there were some things that needed to be done. Yuan Cheng's expression turned serious. He looked at Lu Yi coldly. You're a weapon cultivator, but you can display such a blood Dao secret technique. There's only one reason. Island Master Lu, do we have to be so clear? Lu Yi said. If you can explain it clearly, then go ahead. I'm all ears. As he argued with Yuan Cheng, his divine consciousness surged. In the three-world island, in the pill room, second senior sister had already blown the blue sea conch. The cultivators of the three-world island were retreating to the mermaid clan's territory. Since a few days ago, when Lu Yi felt uneasy, he had a premonition that something was about to happen. Since that was the case, he had already made arrangements. Right now, the most precious thing on the three-world island was naturally the cultivators on the island. Therefore, as long as the cultivators on the island were evacuated, it wouldn't be a big deal even if the three-world island was lost. This time, Yuan Du obviously wouldn't let the matter rest. Lu Ye's fist was not as big as his, so he didn't want to fight him head-on. It wouldn't be too late to wait for Jiu Yin to return and ask her to solve the problem. Yuan Cheng was rambling on, so he was happy to stall for time. Yuan Cheng looked at him deeply. As you wish. After that, he looked at the Blood Clan cultivator and ordered, Find your clansman. The Blood Clan cultivator didn't say a word and immediately activated the Blood Cry technique. When the real Blood Cry technique was activated, it was actually silent. The user could easily sense the presence of their clansman nearby. However, Yuan Du had warned him before coming here. Therefore, the Blood Cry technique he used now was a little different. Under everyone's gaze, the Blood Clan cultivator's chi and blood surged. Immediately, a bloodline stretched out from his body. It wriggled like a living creature and slowly extended towards Lu Yi. This bloodline was completely useless. Its main purpose was to make it easier for outsiders to observe. It was a direct way to let the crowd know that Lu Yi was a Blood Clan cultivator. Seeing the bloodline pointing at Lu Yi, the cultivators who didn't know the truth immediately exclaimed in surprise. Yuan Cheng's face was filled with pride. After today, there would be no more three-world island, and no more Lu Yi in the Wanxiang Sea. According to the plan, the Blood Clan cultivator would identify Lu Yi next. But just as Yuan Cheng was looking forward to it, the Blood Clan cultivator suddenly revealed an extremely shocked expression. He stared blankly at Lu Yi, and then at Ma Shangxi beside Lu Yi. He had indeed used despicable means to frame the young man in front of him, according to Yuan Du's instructions. However, he had also secretly activated the real Blood Cry technique at the same time. In the end, he was shocked to find that the young man he was going to frame was actually one of his clansmen. He had the blood of the Blood Clan in his body, and it seemed to be very pure. Not only him, but the other person standing behind him also had the same. And there seemed to be traces of a third Blood Clan cultivator on the island. This three-world island was a spiritual island occupied by a powerhouse of his clan? The captured Blood Clan cultivator was shocked. He had never expected such a ridiculous thing to happen. He met Lu Ye's gaze, and saw that the other's gaze was leisurely, and seemed to be hiding something. Many thoughts flashed through the captured Blood Clan cultivator's mind. His clan was suffering, just like the insect clan. Everyone in the starry sky wanted to beat them up. In this vast and bustling Wanxiang Sea, every clan had the right to have a share of the pie, except for the insect clan and the Blood Clan. Even if the Blood Clan came, they would have to find ways to conceal themselves and hide their true selves in the dark. Who would have thought that a top-grade spiritual island had been occupied by a powerhouse of his clan? If he caused the other party to be exposed this time, wouldn't he be the sinner of his entire clan? He had long been prepared to die. Death was nothing to be regretted, but he definitely couldn't harm his clansmen. Now that his clan had occupied a top-grade spiritual island in the Wanxiang Sea, he would have the opportunity to start a prairie fire in the future. Therefore, he made a prompt decision. The bloodline that was supposed to extend toward Lu Yi turned in front of Lu Yi and landed directly on Yuan Cheng, who was looking forward to it. Yuan Cheng was stunned and turned to look at the captured Blood Clan cultivator. The Blood Clan cultivator had an excited expression and shouted, "So fellow cultivator Yuan Cheng is actually a member of our clan. You hid it so well." The surrounding cultivators were in an uproar and exclaimed continuously. Yuan Cheng was dumbfounded. He looked at the captured Blood Clan cultivator in disbelief. "What nonsense are you talking about? Things shouldn't have developed this way. According to the original plan, the Blood Clan cultivator should have identified Lu Yi, and he should have stepped forward to question him. Once the Blood Clan cultivator identified him, it wouldn't matter whether Lu Yi admitted it or not. But what was the situation with this Blood Clan cultivator now? Why was he lying through his teeth and framing him instead?" Chapter 1980. Lu Yi knew what Yuan Du was up to when he saw him bring a blood descendant. He was surprised by the blood descendant's betrayal, but he could guess the reason. The blood descendant must have used the blood cry technique and sensed his and Ma Shangxi's blood descendant's bloodline. From the blood descendant's point of view, he would never harm his own people. That was why he framed Yuan Cheng. This was the reason for the awkward situation. Yuan Cheng scolded the blood descendant with an innocent and angry face. The blood descendant was not afraid at all. He was going to die anyway. He could help his people hide better before he died. Yuan Du frowned and looked at the blood descendant. If his original plan was to frame Lu Yi through this blood descendant, he couldn't help but feel suspicious. The blood descendant's behavior was no doubt a cover-up. What was he hiding? Why didn't he follow his orders? He couldn't say that Lu Yi of the Three-World Island was really. Yuan Du's heart skipped a beat. He seemed to have discovered a shocking secret. But he quickly reacted. If the blood descendant did not identify Lu Yi, then what was he doing here? As the guardian of the Sunshine State, he could not do anything to the Three-World Island without any evidence. Otherwise, he would be breaking the rules. Especially this time. In order to show off his impartiality, he had purposely attracted so many cultivators to come and watch. This time, he had really shot himself in the foot. For the first time, Yuan Du felt that his identity as a guardian was a restriction. Suddenly, a fierce magical power surged. Yuan Du was shocked. He quickly turned around and shouted, "No!" However, how could the person who activated the dermic powers pay any attention to him? A figure charged out and punched the air. With this punch, the Blood Clan member who was tangled up with Yuan Cheng was blasted to smithereens. The power of the punch did not diminish at all as it slammed into the protective array of the Three-World Island. Visible shockwaves rippled out from the point of contact. The entire Three-World Island shook violently. "I told you to just do it. Why did you have to do all this nonsense? What a waste of time." Inside the defensive formation, Lu Yi looked at the figure in disbelief. "Hey Yun, isn't this guy dead? More than a year ago, he was surrounded and killed by a few Rizhao from Mount Fengsuan. How could he appear here?" However, the other party's appearance and temperament were clearly that of the dead Black Cloud Demon Venerable. Moreover, based on his impression, the black cloud in front of him seemed to be much stronger than the one he had seen before. He Yun stared coldly at Lu Yi through the protective array. He sent a telepathic message to Lu Yi. "Kid, if you don't want anything to happen to Jiuzhou, you'd better surrender yourself." Lu Yi frowned. "What did you do?" He Yun snorted coldly. "Nothing much." At this moment, 2 great demon venerables and 8 lesser demon venerables, a total of 10 demon venerables, have joined forces to lead an army to the 9 states. They will arrive in 3 months. Ever since his Dharmakaya had fallen into the hands of the 9 states, He Yun had been thinking about revenge all the time. However, according to his speculation, Lu Yi had most likely obtained the inheritance of the Dao tree. Therefore, when he asked Zixian's army to move out, he himself came to the Wanxiang Sea and decided to take down Lu Yi personally. Attacking the 9 states was a safety measure. Because the inheritance of the Dao tree was only his speculation, he could not be sure. Therefore, the best plan was to take down Lu Yi and the Three-World Island while taking down the 9 states. Then, no matter where the inheritance of the Dao tree was, it would not be out of his control. He knew that there were strong cultivators in Jiuzhou. Otherwise, his Dharmakaya would not have fallen. However, no matter how strong they were, Zixian's 10 Rizhao were mobilizing together, leading tens of thousands of troops. It was impossible that they could not take down Jiuzhou. Calculating the time, Zixian's army should be halfway there. After he took down Lu Yi, he would even have time to join Zixian's army and personally preside over the battle to see who had destroyed his Dharmakaya. Lu Ye's expression changed. Although there were several Rizhao from Mount Fengsuan and Jiuzhou, Zixian's force was too strong. Mount Fengsuan alone was unable to contend with Zixian, unless the south and west also came to help. Even so, they could only contend with Zixian in the Rizhao level. When the battle started, the people of Jiuzhou would be plunged into misery and suffering. Seeing the anger in Lu Ye's eyes, He Yun transmitted a message. Of course, if you are willing to surrender and answer a few questions, I will immediately call back Zixian's army. Of course, this was a lie. Zixian's army had already been mobilized. Even if he was one of the 5 great monster lords, he could not interfere with the army's progress. He only said this to make it easier to take down Lu Yi. He could feel that Yuan Du had ulterior motives. However, in his opinion, Yuan Du was after the Three-World Island itself, while he wanted Lu Yi and the cultivators of the Three-World Island. Therefore, their demands did not conflict. You are courting death. Lu Yi looked at him coldly. He Yun snorted. No one has dared to speak to me like this for many years. The exchange of divine thoughts between the two only lasted for a moment, but this unforeseen event shocked all the onlookers. No one expected Rizhao to suddenly appear from behind Yuan Du at this time and attack so brazenly. Moreover, Rizhao's aura was obviously unusual. He is a monster lord of the monster clan. Someone with good eyesight recognized He Yun's origin at a glance. Monster clan. So, he should be the monster lord of Zixian. Is it monster lord He Yun? I remember seeing him once from afar when I was young. A monster lord attacking for no reason is against the rules. Didn't the guardians do anything? While the cultivators were discussing, 4 figures gathered in front of the guardian palace on the island of all manifestations, looking in the direction of the Three-World Island. These 4 people were none other than Yuan Du, the other 4 guardians of the palace. Gu Shi of the Tianyan realm, Mu Qing of the Kunyu realm, Emma Winley of the Illusion God realm, and Chen Xuanba of the Gaotian continent. Including the Yuan realm, where Yuan Du came from, these realms were basically the most powerful in the entire Wanxiang galaxy. What is senior brother Yuan Du doing? Mu Qing frowned. As guardians of the Rizhao realm, Yuan Du had been planning something recently. Of course they knew about it. Before Yuan Du left this time, he had informed them and promised that no matter what he did, he would not break the rules of the Wanxiang Sea. But now it seemed that Yuan Du's promise was bullshit. The outsider Rizhao had already made his move here. If this matter was not resolved properly, it would greatly damage the prestige and reputation of the Rizhao realm. It might even lead to a series of turmoil. Should we go and take a look? Emma Winley asked. What can we do if we see? Chen Xuanba shook his head slowly. Do we help or stop them? If they helped, the reputation that the Wanxiang Sea had built up over the years would be gone in an instant. But if they stopped them, they would only be seen as a joke by outsiders. So, no matter what choice they made, they could only wait and see. They could only wait for Yuan Du to settle this matter, so that the Wanxiang Sea's interests would not be damaged too badly. It's the Three-World Island again. They are indeed restless. Gu Shi snorted coldly. His words seemed to be criticizing the Three-World Island. The other Rizhao realm experts knew very well. Gu Shi had always looked down on the Three-World Island. It was not because of his deep friendship with Yuan Du, but because the unparalleled island had been taken by the Tianyan realm behind him. In the end, the unparalleled island had fallen, and the Three-World Island had risen. Gu Shi had always felt that the Three-World Island had stolen the fate of the unparalleled island. That was why the situation of one spiritual island falling and the other rising was happening. If the Three-World Island did not exist, the matchless island might still be as prosperous as it was now. It could bring great benefits to the Tianyan realm. But today, how many people in the Wanxiang Sea still remembered the matchless island? He was happy to see Yuan Du attack the Three-World Island. Maybe after Yuan Du took over the Three-World Island, the matchless island that belonged to the Tianyin realm would have a chance to revive. At this time, outside the Three-World Island, He Yun brazenly attacked. Yuan Du couldn't stop him in time. Many doubts flashed through his mind. He immediately shouted, "This blood race would rather die to frame me. Wuxia, you are indeed from the blood race. Show your true form." That blood kindred's previous actions were too strange. It was impossible for him to believe that Yuan Cheng was a blood kindred, because Yuan Cheng was his junior in the Yuan world. Others might not know whether Yuan Cheng was a blood kindred or not. But how could he not know? But the other party had clearly made such a decision in advance. He was undoubtedly covering up for Wuxia. Yuan Du was 80% sure that Wuxia was from the blood race. He didn't have evidence, but it didn't matter. He would first pin this big accusation on Wuxia, and then he would have the right to do so. Although the process was not satisfactory, it was fine as long as the direction of the matter was not out of his control. If you want to condemn someone, you can always find a pretext. Wuxia coldly snorted. After the insect and blood race suffered a great loss at the reincarnation tree's alpha origin stage, they jointly issued a huge reward for me. I believe many people have heard of the name Wuxia from the Nine Heavens. How can I be from the blood race? Yuan Du was taken aback. Yes, if Wuxia was from the blood race, then what was the matter with the reward? There were many people who had the same doubts as him. Many people knew about the reward issued by the insect and blood race back then, and also knew that the person on the bounty was Wuxia from the Nine Heavens. However, very few people knew that Wuxia from the Nine Heavens was actually Wuxia from the Three-World Island. Now that he said it out loud, it naturally became a means to prove his innocence. Fortunately, He Yun's brain worked quickly. He knew that he shouldn't be entangled with Wuxia at this time, and should quickly take him down. He immediately sneered. "I have naturally heard of Wuxia from the Nine Heavens. But are you really from the Nine Heavens? You are clearly from the Nine Heavens." He was certain that Wuxia wouldn't dare to answer this question. As expected, Wuxia immediately shut his mouth. While the two were exchanging words, He Yun's subordinates didn't stop. After a few punches, the entire Three-World Island was thrown into turmoil, and the defensive formation that had been accumulated for many years was on the verge of collapse. This was the power of sunlight. Let alone the defensive formation of the Three-World Island, even Zixian's defensive formation couldn't withstand such an attack. In comparison, Zixian's defensive formation was much stronger than the Three-World Islands. End of this chapter. Chapter 1981. When he sensed Yuan Du's arrival, Wuxia had already pushed the power of the island's protective array to its limit, consuming the spiritual energy it had accumulated over the years. If not for this, He Yun would have been able to break the array in 2 or 3 strikes. Even at this moment, the array wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Wuxia could clearly see the array's light curtain dimming at a speed visible to the naked eye, and even small cracks flashed across its surface. This was clearly the result of the array withstanding an attack that exceeded its limits. Wuxia frowned and sent a divine sense message to He Baichuan and the others beside him. Go! Yuan Du and He Yun had come with such ferocity this time that it was impossible for them to give up. Once the array was broken, everyone would become fish on the chopping block. Therefore, they had to evacuate Three-World Island before the array was broken. Receiving his orders, He Baichuan and the others didn't hesitate at all, turning around and flying down, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Over at the pill room, the door leading to the merfolk territory was wide open, and all the cultivators on Three-World Island were nervously evacuating in an orderly manner. However, there were many cultivators, and the door was only so big, so it would still take some time for them to evacuate. Wuxia estimated that before the array was broken, all the cultivators on the island wouldn't be able to evacuate in time. He still had to use the red talisman. Thinking so, Wuxia no longer hesitated, his body releasing a bright red light as his aura rose rapidly. Red talisman? Yuan Du had been watching Wuxia's movements closely. He had seen the scene of He Baichuan and the others leaving just now, and could roughly guess where they were going. But he didn't care. All he wanted was to keep an eye on Lu Yi. In other words, as long as Lu Yi was still here, no one else mattered. Once he captured Lu Yi, the entire three-world island, and even the merfolk territory would be his. But at this moment, when Lu Yi activated an unknown red talisman, Yuan Du was surprised. He knew that Lu Yi seemed to have a good relationship with the humanoid race, but he didn't expect it to be so good that he even had a red talisman. Just as he was thinking about what type of red talisman this was, and what kind of power it would erupt with, Lu Yi suddenly shouted, "Combine!" As his voice echoed, the red light shot into the three-world island's defensive formation and fused with it. In an instant, the entire defensive formation turned red. From afar, it looked like the cultivators of the three-world island were covered in a layer of blood. The defensive formation that was on the verge of collapse, under the onslaught of the black clouds, suddenly became much more solid. "You're kind-hearted, aren't you?" Yuan Du looked at Lu Yi, having already seen through the power of the red talisman. It was clearly a red talisman used for protection, but Lu Yi didn't use it on himself. Instead, he used it on the defensive formation to increase its strength. This was clearly to buy time for the other cultivators to escape, but there was no point in doing so. "What nonsense are you spouting? What are you waiting for?" He Yin shouted in a low voice. From the moment he attacked until now, Yuan Du had actually been watching with the cold eyes of a bystander, and even had the mood to criticize Lu Ye's actions. He Yin simply didn't know what Yuan Du was thinking. Didn't he know the principle of long delays being fraught with problems? The defensive formation here was about to be broken, but with the support of Lu Ye's red talisman, it was able to struggle at death's door for a while. If Yuan Du had attacked with him earlier, Lu Yi would have been captured by now. This undoubtedly displeased He Yin. As soon as He Yin finished speaking, Yuan Du took a step forward. Even at this time, he didn't forget to shout, "Lu Yi of the Blood Tribe, hiding in the Myriad Sea and occupying the three-world island. You harbor evil intentions. Today, this guardian will take you down and enforce justice on behalf of the heavens." As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hand and pointed forward. This silent attack caused the barrier of light strengthened by the red talisman to tremble violently. Lu Yi couldn't help but take a few steps back. With two great suns attacking at the same time, the defensive formation wouldn't even last 5 breaths. It was time to evacuate. He didn't run toward the pill room, because it was a bit far away. Moreover, the Azure Sea Snail's door could only be opened for a limited time. There was no aura left over there, so Lu Yi didn't know if the door had closed or not. If the door was already closed by the time he got there, he would have no tears to cry. Thus, he quickly arrived at the edge of a cliff. Below him was the pitch-black Myriad Sea. He had never worried about encountering too much danger on the Myriad Sea, because he had an ability that no one else had, and that was to survive under the Myriad Sea. When he first came to the Myriad Sea, Lu Yi had thought that if he encountered an enemy he couldn't beat one day, he would jump into the sea to escape. However, he had never encountered such a situation. He didn't expect to be forced into such a situation at the late Yueyao stage. Lu Yi turned around and looked at Yuan Du and He Yin, who were attacking the defensive formation from afar. A cold glint flashed through his eyes. It hadn't been easy for the three-world island to reach this point. Under the rules on the surface, no one dared to provoke them. If nothing unexpected happened, the three-world island would stand here for 1,000 years, 10,000 years, or even longer. It would provide long-term and powerful support to the development of the Jade Conch Galaxy. However, rules were indeed meant to be broken. In the end, his fists weren't strong enough. He had lost Matchless Island back then, and now he was about to lose the three-world island. This made Lu Yi angry and helpless. He still needed to be strong enough. If he was strong enough, he wouldn't have to follow the rules set by others. At that time, he could become the one who set the rules. Not good. Yuan Du met Lu Ye's gaze. Although he didn't know what Lu Yi wanted to do, he instinctively felt that something was wrong. He couldn't help but increase the strength of his attacks. Under his and He Yun's fierce attacks, the defensive formation of the entire three-world island shattered, like a mirror in a short time. Countless cracks spread, and the power of the red talisman was exhausted. A loud crash resounded in all directions. The defensive formation was completely broken. Two figures rushed towards Lu Ye's position at almost the same time, their speed extremely fast. Lu Ye's expression was calm as he stared coldly at He Yun and Yuan Du, as if he wanted to remember their ugly faces deep in his mind. Then he was about to jump into the sea, but at this moment, he suddenly turned his head and looked in the direction of the alchemy room. A vigorous aura appeared out of thin air in the alchemy room. This is... Lu Ye's expression couldn't help but change. At this moment he couldn't help but think of the word, how that the dice of fate had rolled out. This is really... Ma Bin had been in the merfolk territory for more than a year. During this time, he had been recuperating in the spirit jade vein. The results were obvious. Although he was far from fully recovered, the injury to his Dao foundation had stabilized and would not continue to worsen. As long as he continued to recuperate like this, he would recover sooner or later. But today he suddenly noticed some abnormalities. In the direction of the celestial spiral palace, it had become very lively. It seemed that many cultivators of the three-world island had come here. In the past, there had often been exchanges between the three-world island and the merfolk territory, but there had never been so many people at once. At first, Ma Bin didn't pay much attention to it, but gradually, he found that something was wrong. His divine sense was so powerful that it only took him a little investigation to roughly understand the cause of the matter. The cultivators of the three-world island had come to take refuge. Yuan Du disregarded the rules and joined forces with a purple jade demon venerable to attack the protective array of the three-world island. The three-world island was unable to resist and could only temporarily avoid the attack. This time Ma Bin couldn't sit still. He walked out of the place where he was recuperating and came to the celestial spiral palace. After asking around, he learned that Lu Yi was still in the three-world island. He Baichuan and the others said with certainty that Lu Yi had already made arrangements, and there was no need to worry about his safety. After everyone in the three-world island retreated, he would have a way to escape. Ma Bin suppressed his temper and waited in front of the palace, waiting. But he didn't see Lu Ye's figure. In the end, he couldn't wait any longer. Ignoring the dissuasion of others, he stepped out of the palace and prepared to go to the three-world island to see the situation in person. Lu Yi had taken him in and given him hope of recovery. As a junior of the 9 provinces who he thought highly of, how could he just stand by and watch when he was in trouble? Although he wasn't in a good state at the moment, if Lu Yi was really in danger, he wouldn't have a problem protecting him. The moment he stepped into the three-world island, the protective array was broken. Lu Yi stood at the edge of the cliff, as if he was about to jump into the sea in desperation. Yuan Du and He Yun pounced on Lu Yi with lightning speed, as if they were going to kill him. Ma Bin was furious. The aura of a peak sunshine realm cultivator burst out, and he roared, "You're courting death." Boom! The alchemy room shattered. Ma Bin turned into a ray of light and rushed to He Yun, and Yuan Du. His spiritual power surged and wrapped around the two. He Yun and Yuan Du were both stunned. They didn't expect such a strong cultivator to suddenly appear in the three-world island. But soon, Yuan Du's face changed drastically. He exclaimed, "Azure Demon King Ma Bin? How? Why is this god of death in the three-world island?" And he jumped out at this time. "My life is over." Although Yuan Du had never crossed paths with Ma Bin before, he knew how powerful Ma Bin was. After all, it was all thanks to Ma Bin that he was able to take up the post of guardian of the Vientiane Sea. If Ma Bin had not forcibly killed Rizhao back then, the number of guardians of the Vientiane Sea would not have increased, and he would not have had a chance. He was focused on dealing with Lu Yi and the three-world island. He thought that the situation was under his control. But today, there were so many unforeseen events, and the current one was the most fatal. Even the Azure Demon King Ma Bin had appeared. This guy had been hiding in the three-world island all this time? But that's not right. Jiu Yan had been guarding the three-world island all this time. If Ma Bin was here, how could Jiu Yan not notice him? These two can't have a personal relationship. Ma Bin killed Rizhao of the 9 provinces. If Jiu Yan saw him, She definitely wouldn't let him go. End of chapter. Chapter 1982. When Yuan Du recognized Ma Bin, his heart was filled with regret. If he had known that Ma Bin was in the Three-World Island, he would not have come here. Did he think that he had lived too long? Under the control of his mind, he could not use his strength at all. He took a blow from Ma Bin and was blown far away. Fortunately, he took out a magic weapon to protect himself at the critical moment. Otherwise, he would have been injured by this blow. As expected of the Azure Demon King Ma Bin, Yuan Du's heart palpitated as he turned his head to look. He saw that Ma Bin had already engaged in a fierce battle with the Black Cloud. The clash of the sun's mana was unrestrained, causing the four poles to become unstable and turbulent. For a moment, they were actually evenly matched. He Yun is so strong. Yuan Du was stunned for a moment. He knew that He Yun's strength was stronger than his, but it was still surprising that he could fight Ma Bin so well. But soon he realized the reason. Although Ma Bin's momentum was incomparably powerful, and every move contained great power, it always gave people a feeling that it was not smooth enough. After all, he was a sun, so he naturally had a good eyesight. Suddenly his eyes lit up, and he understood that Ma Bin was injured. That was why He Yun could fight him as an equal. No matter when Ma Bin was injured, and who was the cause of his injury, it was good news for his side. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and take down that kid. He Yun's exasperated voice rang out. Ever since Zi Xian suffered a huge loss because of Yuan Du's instigation, He Yun knew that this guy was unreliable. But he never thought that this guy would be unreliable to this extent. The famous Azure Demon King Ma Bin was hiding in the Three-World Island, and Yuan Du, as the Sunbeam Guardian of the 10,000 Elephant Sea, didn't know about it at all. Not only that, but Yuan Du was still in a daze while he was fighting Ma Bin. At this time, shouldn't he take the opportunity to take down Wuxia as a bargaining chip? Ma Bin obviously jumped out because of Wuxia and the Three-World Island. At this time, as long as he took down Ma Bin would not attack him. But he had to admit that this Azure Demon King was really strong. If Yuan Du could sense that Ma Bin was injured, how could He Yun, who was fighting him head-on, not be able to sense it? Even so, he was only evenly matched with his opponent. If he was at his peak, how could he be a match for him? As soon as he shouted, Yuan Du immediately moved. At the edge of the cliff, Lu Yi couldn't help but sigh when he saw Yuan Du pouncing towards him again, and his face was filled with helplessness and emotion. This time, his fate was really full of misfortune. As long as he entered the 10,000 Elephant Sea, He Yun and Yuan Du wouldn't be able to catch him no matter how powerful they were. However, his plans could not keep up with the changes. He did not expect that at this critical moment, Ma Bin would actually charge out of the door. This senior from the 9 provinces treated him well. When he sensed his presence in the Azura domain, he immediately turned back to face the enemy. He fought 1 against 4, and in the end, his Dao foundation was damaged rather than implicate him. Today, seeing that he was in trouble, he even disregarded his injuries to face the enemy. From Ma Bin's point of view, what he did was right. Lu Yi was forced to jump into the sea. How could he just stand by and watch? Naturally, he would go out and support the younger generation. But he had disrupted Lu Yi's plan. Lu Yi could only blame Yuan Du and He Yun for coming here so abruptly. Lu Yi had only made arrangements for the cultivators on the island, and had never thought of notifying Ma Bin in advance. By a freak combination of factors, the current situation had occurred. At this moment, Yuan Du was charging towards Lu Yi, but Lu Yi didn't panic at all, because he felt a familiar aura from the door. When he turned his head to look, he saw 2 figures brazenly charging out from that direction, joining forces to meet Yuan Du's attack. Yuan Du turned his head in a daze, and saw that it was 2 beautiful women. The aura surging around them was impossible to ignore. How come there were 2 more Rikhas? Where did these 2 come from? He had no idea that the Three-World Island was hiding so much power. A few years ago, through the use of soul-searching technique on the cultivators of the Three-World Island, Yuan Du learned many secrets that the island didn't think it knew. But only now did he realize that what he knew was only the tip of the iceberg. The three-world island was hiding a lot. With two Rikhas joining forces to attack, Yuan Du didn't dare to be careless. But when he took a closer look, these two beautiful women looked a little familiar. He held a grudge against Lu Yi and the three-world island, so he naturally paid more attention to the island. So he quickly recognized the two women as the two former island masters of the three-world island. A few years ago, they were both at the late stage of Yuyao. One was Luan Xiaoa from the Jade Conch boundary, and the other was Yen Miao from the Mermaid clan. These two had followed Ma Bin back to the three-world island, and when they saw Yuan Du about to attack Lu Yi, they naturally wouldn't sit back and watch. Just two new Rikhas. Yuan Du was furious. He couldn't afford to offend Ma Bin, but he couldn't afford to offend two new Rikhas who hadn't even been in the Jade Conch boundary for a few years. Did they really think he'd wasted his years of cultivation? His figure flickered, and he summoned a magic treasure to protect himself, and immediately engaged the two women in a fierce battle. Countless onlookers outside the three-world island were stunned. In recent years, the Wanxiang Sea had indeed been lively, especially when it had to do with the three-world island. Whether it was conquering Baiyu or defeating Zixian, the battles were extraordinarily fierce and exciting. But the cultivators had never thought that there would be an even more exciting scene to watch. Yuan Du and the Black Cloud Venerable had joined forces to attack the three-world island. They had thought that the three-world island was powerless to resist and could only be slaughtered. But now, the Azure Demon King, Ma Bin, and the Black Cloud Venerable were locked in a fierce battle. Now two new Rikhas had blocked Yuan Du and were fighting. Wasn't it said that only the Rikhas could stay on the Wanxiang Sea for a long time? Three new Rikhas had popped out of the three-world island in such a short time. This was simply ridiculous. The key was that Yuan Du, the island master, didn't seem to know anything about this before. The Yuyao cultivators who had been recruited by Yuan Du to come with him all had solemn expressions. They secretly rejoiced that the Black Cloud Venerable had come with them. Otherwise, if Yuan Du had led them to attack the three-world island alone, they would have been wiped out. In the crowd, Giant Blade Island's Zhao Yunqi trembled. He felt that he couldn't stay in this place for long. Taking advantage of Yuan Du's distraction, he quietly left the crowd and quickly left. Even if Yuan Du would blame him later, he couldn't care too much. At the edge of the cliff, Lu Yi calmly watched. Things had developed to this point, and had deviated from his original plan. After today, it would be difficult for the three-world island to gain a foothold in the Wanxiang Sea. Not to mention anything else, just the fact that they had harbored Ma Bin was absolutely intolerable in the Wanxiang galaxy. But it didn't matter too much. The three-world island had made a lot of money over the years. In the short term, the three-world island's cultivators would have no problem cultivating. Moreover, he had always been worried that it wouldn't be long before he became a Rikhas. At that time, he definitely wouldn't be able to stay on the three-world island. Most of the three-world island's fame came from his name. If he didn't stay on the island, it would be difficult for the three-world island's cultivators to protect such a delicious piece of meat. Taking advantage of this opportunity to retreat at the top of the tide was not necessarily a bad choice. Thinking of this, Lu Ye's mood became more relaxed. At this time, under the Wanxiang Sea, in the merfolk's territory, a sealed piece of amber suddenly emitted a cracking sound. Inside the amber, Hua Xi's eyes, which had been closed for many years, slowly opened. A faint golden light flashed through them. Upon closer inspection, the golden light was in the shape of an ancient coin. The corners of her lips curled up slightly as she murmured softly, "The heartless man is in trouble." All these years, she seemed to have been in a deep slumber, but in reality, she hadn't lost her perception of the outside world. Hence, she was aware of everything that happened around her. But because her pet beast had mutated after swallowing that strange ancient coin, even she, its master, was in a strange state. In this state, coupled with the fact that Lu Yi had placed her in a suitable environment, both her and her pet beast's cultivation improved at a terrifying rate. If this state didn't stop, it would continue. But today the Conch Palace was too lively. Not only did it alarm Ma Bin, who was recuperating, But it also alarmed Wuxia, who had been sealed all this time. She had planned to unseal herself after she became a rikhaz. But since Lu Yi was in trouble, she had no choice but to do it now. When she was sealed, Lu Yi would often visit her and ramble on beside her. She had heard a lot of infuriating things. The heartless man thought that she couldn't sense him, so he told her a lot of things. But he didn't know that she could hear him. Kacha. The amber shattered, and Wuxia stepped out of it. Her temperament had changed drastically compared to before. Her appearance was even more beautiful, and even her black hair was slightly rippling with a strange golden light. A strange sound came out. Wuxia lowered her head and looked at the golden toad in her arms. This guy used to be bumpy and ugly, but now it had been reborn with its master. It had the blood of a Pishio, so it was no longer as ugly as it used to be. Its body was covered in a golden light, and there were also marks in the shape of golden coins on its body. It looked noble and extraordinary. Yes, you also think that he should be taught a lesson. Wuxia nodded slightly. Gua. After a while, in front of the Conch Palace's door, Shui Yuan looked at Wuxia in surprise. Junior sister, you're awake? In the entire three-world island, Shui Yuan was the closest to Wuxia. Both of them were from the Jade Blood sect, and were senior sisters and junior sisters. They were also medical cultivators. It could be said that Shui Yuan was both Huaxi's senior sister and Huaxi's master. She had taught her many things. In response to Shui Yuan's question, Wuxia merely glanced at her and blinked silently. Then, she expressionlessly walked towards the door that was about to disappear. Shui Yuan couldn't help but be stunned. For some reason, Huaxi's gaze was extremely strange. End of chapter. Chapter 1983. Senior Sister Wuxia. A cultivator who knew Wuxia called out softly. Wuxia turned her head and looked over indifferently. When their eyes met, the cultivator couldn't help but be stunned on the spot. For some inexplicable reason, a feeling of inferiority arose in his heart. He was not the only one who felt this way. Most of the cultivators present felt the same way. It was as if Wuxia was a high and mighty goddess, and they were the filthy insects in the mud. Just looking at her was blasphemy. Many people quickly lowered their heads. When they came back to their senses, Wuxia had disappeared. The portal also disappeared completely. Oh no! Only then did someone realize, it's not safe on the island now. Wuxia. Everyone was surprised by Huaxi's change. No one expected her to return to the three-world island at this time. It would not have mattered if it was before. But the sunshine battle had broken out there. Yuan Du, He Yun Ma Bin Luan Xiao and Yin Miao were fighting. How could Wuxia in well if she rushed in like this? Where's Yiya? Shui Yuan discovered another thing that frightened her. Yaya, who had always been by her side, had disappeared without her noticing. The two sunshine battle groups on the three-world island were locked in a fierce battle. Ma Bin and He Yun were evenly matched, but Ma Bin could not maintain this state for long. His Dao foundation had not recovered. It was not the right time to fight fiercely. The longer it dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for him. Luan Xiao and Yin Miao were fighting Yuan Du together. They were not in a good situation. Although they were fighting 1 against 2, they had just reached the sunshine level not long ago. Yuan Du had reached the sunshine level many years ago. In terms of cultivation, he was definitely stronger. If that was all, it would not be a big deal. The key was that there were other suns on the vast Wanxiang Sea. Lu Yi looked in the direction of the Wanxiang Island. Even from far away, he could clearly feel that there were several powerful auras approaching. It would not take long for them to reach the three-world island. They were the other 4 guardians of the Wanxiang Sea. With such a big change happening on the three-world island, even the Azure Demon King Ma Bin appeared. How could they just stand by and watch? Ma Bin's side had a grudge with the Wanxiang Galaxy, so no matter which side they stood on, the 4 of them had to come and help Yuan Du. Lu Yi knew that something was wrong. He had to leave before the 4 Rizhao arrived. Otherwise, he would never be able to leave. He wouldn't be in any danger. At worst, he would just have to jump into the sea. However, Ma Bin, Luan Xiao, and Smoky Miao had to leave quickly. If they left now, they still had a chance to escape. The longer they delayed, the greater the risk. How did the situation develop to this point? Lu Ye's face was full of helplessness. He clenched his fist lightly. In his heart, he even had the thought of breaking through to sunshine right now. He had already accumulated enough foundation, and could break through to the sunshine realm at any time. The only reason he was delaying it was to polish his spiritual source. If he was Rizhao, he wouldn't be standing here and watching. In the end, he suppressed the impulse in his heart. In order to polish his art source, he had put in a lot of effort. If he gave up now, then all his previous efforts would have been in vain. Lu Ye's divine sense surged, and just as he was about to send a message to Ma Bin and the others to retreat, Lu Yi suddenly caught a glimpse of a familiar figure from the corner of his eye. Lu Yi turned to look, and the corner of his eye twitched. The small figure skipped over to Lu Yi and looked up at him. Her cute face was full of mischief. "Why did you run over here?" Lu Yi hurriedly bent down and hugged Yaya. But it didn't matter. If he only had Yaya, he could still escape by jumping into the sea. But for some reason, he felt that Yaya was a little different today. His neck tightened as Yaya stretched out her hands and hugged him. Her little head was pressed against his chest as she sniffed deeply, as if she wanted to remember Lu Ye's scent in her heart. Then, her soft voice sounded, "Daddy, it's time to say goodbye." Huh. Lu Yi was stunned. Why? A small hand suddenly pressed on his lips, stopping him from speaking. Yaya raised her head and smiled brightly at him. A strange light flashed in her eyes, and a wicked expression appeared on her small face. "Also, don't let me catch you and beat you to death in the future." You. Many thoughts flashed through Lu Ye's mind. Before he could say anything, Yaya had jumped out of his arms and rushed toward the nearest battle. That was the battlefield where Yuan Du, Wan Xiaoa, and Yin Miao were. His small figure was so inconspicuous, but at this moment, countless pairs of eyes were focused on him. The main reason was that this scene was too sudden. Even Yu Yao could not casually interfere in such a battle of sunshine. But now, a child had suddenly appeared. Yuan Du also noticed Yaya's approach. He had always known of Yaya's existence. After all, he had been paying attention to the three-world island. But he didn't know about Yaya's background. He only thought that she was a junior brought over by Lu Yi from the 9 states. At this moment, seeing Yaya rushing toward him, Yuan Du was furious. Today was supposed to be a good day for him to take down Lu Yi and seize the three-world island. But in the end, his foolproof plan had made one mistake after another. As a result, not only did he fail to take down Lu Yi, but he was also besieged by 2 women. A child who came out of nowhere dared to offend him. "Get lost." Yuan Du waved his sleeves, and when the surging supernatural power rolled out, it wrapped Yaya in an instant. Yaya left quickly and came back quickly. Her small figure flew backward like a kite with a broken string. Lu Ye's heart tightened. Although he knew that Yaya had the power of sunshine, and that such a blow couldn't do anything to her, he still couldn't help but worry. Yaya's small face suddenly showed a look of anger, and then she rushed toward Yuan Du again. But this time, halfway through, she suddenly raised her 2 lotus root-like white arms and touched them in the middle. "Break!" Yaya's voice rang out. The jade bracelets on her wrists suddenly shattered, turning into spots of fluorescent light that enveloped her. In the light, the small figure twisted and changed rapidly. By the time Yaya rushed out of the light, her whole person had changed greatly. The little girl, who looked to be only 7 or 8 years old, was now tall and slim. Her face was cold and beautiful, and her black hair was like a waterfall. Every strand of hair was dancing and twisting like a living thing. Her clothes had also changed into a rainbow-colored dress, which was dazzling. She was obviously a heavenly beauty, but her aura was as fierce as an ancient ferocious beast, intimidating everyone. The sudden change stunned everyone who saw this scene. Even Ma Bin and He Yun, who were fighting in the distance, couldn't help but turn their heads to look. Another sunshine. The spectating cultivators were numb. What kind of dragon's pool and tiger's den was this three-world island? 3 sunshine were not enough, but there was a 4th one, and in such an unimaginable way. On second thought, there were 4 sunshine cultivators hiding in the three-world island. What were they trying to do? The Wanxiang Sea would never allow an outsider sunshine to stay for too long. On the edge of the cliff in the three-world island, Lu Yi frowned at Yaya's change. Although he didn't understand why Yaya said those words before, he could feel one thing. He was about to lose Yaya. This cheap daughter he picked up from the Mist Dragon had brought him a lot of warmth, and she had helped him out of danger several times. But after all, Yaya had a background. When he picked her up, her divine soul was injured and she was unconscious, causing her memory to be damaged. But the great sunshine was acting like a child. After so many years, Lu Yi could vaguely feel that Yaya was slowly recovering. And her 2 jade bracelets, which belonged to her, were also found in the Mist Dragon. The bracelets were broken, and Yaya returned to her original appearance. In this way, the 2 jade bracelets should be a kind of seal, which sealed Yaya's cultivation and memory. Now that the bracelets were broken, she had regained everything. Lu Yi didn't know what kind of method this was, but at this moment, he felt a little suffocated. While he was thinking, Yaya had brazenly charged into the battle group where Yuan Du was. Her surging spiritual power surged and her figure intertwined. Even if Lu Yi used his full eyesight, he couldn't see the specific situation of the battle clearly. He only heard a muffled groan, and then a figure fell from the sky into the Wanxiang Sea like a meteorite. Seawater splashed everywhere. There were cries of surprise all around. The 10,000 elephant sea's water was a terrifying representation. Although everyone knew that the 10,000 elephant sea's water was the condensation of starry sky spirit energy, it was too corrosive. It was so corrosive that even Rizhao didn't dare to enter it at will. As for Rizhao, once he fell into the sea, he would definitely die. Therefore, when cultivators fought on the Wanxiang Sea, the first thing they had to pay attention to was not to be knocked into the sea by the enemy. This was something that everyone tried to avoid. But no one expected that Sunshine couldn't avoid something that even the Yu Yao constellation tried to avoid. Everyone saw clearly that the one who fell into the sea was not someone else, but Yuan Du, who had come aggressively before. In any case, he was still a veteran Rakashi. Just now, he had the upper hand in a 1-on-2 fight. Now, the third Rakashi had joined the battle. In just a few breaths, he had been beaten into the sea. One could imagine how strong this third Rakashi was. In the battle group, Luan Xiao and Yin Miao were a little dumbfounded, staring blankly at the beautiful woman standing beside them. Yaya. Luan Xiao called softly. On the woman's facial features, traces of Yaya's appearance could be vaguely seen, as if Yaya had grown up. She also clearly saw how the woman changed from Yaya to this appearance. But the current situation was still somewhat beyond her understanding. End of chapter. Chapter 1984. Luan Xiao knew that Yaya was Rizhao, but she never knew that Yaya was so powerful after recovering. The onlookers couldn't see the battle clearly, but how could she and Yin Miao not know? The power that Yaya burst out at that moment was not something that new Rizhao like her and Yin Miao could compare with. Not to mention that Yuan Du was already restrained by the two of them. Even if it was a 1-on-1 fight, Luan Xiao estimated that Yuan Du could not last more than 10 breaths under Yaya's hands. And it was inevitable that he would be beaten into the sea. In the past, when Yaya was playing around in the three-world island, Luan Xiao also took care of her. Because Lu Yi was not in the three-world island all year round, and Xueyuan was always in charge of the alchemy room, she did not pay much attention to Yaya. On the contrary, she, the former island master, spent a lot of time with Yaya. Luan Xiao had always liked this little girl, and once thought that if she could find someone she liked, she might be able to give birth to such a child. In the past, Yaya was relatively close to her, but at this moment, Luan Xiao felt that there was a dangerous aura around Yaya, which made her look sluggish. Yaya turned her head again and looked in the direction of Lu Yi. Their eyes met, and she snorted with a cold look. Her divine thoughts surged, and she transmitted a message. "Live well before I catch you, don't die." Then she quickly swept away, looking like she was in a hurry. Lu Yi frowned. In just a dozen breaths, Yaya had changed into a completely different person. Before the seal was lifted, she deliberately ran over to hug her, looking very reluctant. But after the seal was lifted, Lu Yi felt that there was hostility in Yaya's eyes. It was a kind of shame and anger from the past, that she could not bear to look back on. Then she remembered what Yaya said before. Was she really going to catch her and beat her to death? She sighed deeply. Her worries from a long time ago had come true. Yaya, who had recovered her Rizhao body, really cared about all the things that happened before. When she was still a child, she was affected by that state, and her mind was innocent. But once she recovered, it was completely different. Thinking about it, it was hard for anyone to accept what happened to Yaya. That was a stain in life, and since it was a stain, it naturally had to be erased. But on second thought, if Yaya really cared about this stain, then she should not have gone to deal with Yuan Du after the seal was lifted. Instead, she should have gone to deal with him first. But she still went to deal with Yuan Du. Looking at it this way, Yaya was also tough on the mouth but soft on the heart. Or it could be said that there were contradictions in her heart. However, there was one thing that puzzled Lu Yi. Why was Yaya running so fast? She seemed to be hiding from something. Just as he was thinking about this, an extremely strong energy fluctuation suddenly emerged in midair, followed by a bright pattern that quickly spread out in outline, turning into an extremely complex pattern. Lu Yi frowned and looked at it with rapt attention. With a glance, he could see that there were traces of void spirit runes in the complicated pattern. This is a teleportation formation built with void spirit runes as the foundation? It was very different from the teleportation formation that he had set up himself. But Lu Yi could feel that this teleportation formation was very exquisite. Who set this up? And he did not know if it was a coincidence or not. But the location where this teleportation formation appeared was exactly where Yaya had revealed her original appearance after the seal was lifted, and there were still remnants of Yaya's aura there. This teleportation formation appeared very abruptly, and was so large and conspicuous that Lu Yi saw it, and so did the others. For a moment, they were surprised and thought that it was a trick set up by the three-world island. The next moment, a fleshless skeletal hand suddenly reached out from the teleportation formation. Although it was only a large hand, it was filled with a monstrous aura that caused the space to distort. Luan Xiaoa and Yin Miao, who were near the teleportation formation, changed their expressions and hurriedly dodged. The skeletal hand twisted and struggled, and the teleportation formation surged. Behind the hand, a figure was about to cross the teleportation formation. Roar! A roar came out, and the teleportation formation suddenly expanded. Under the distortion of the void, a huge figure appeared out of thin air above the 10,000 elephant sea. It was a skeleton without any flesh on its body, and only 2 balls of dark flames burned in its eyes. The strong aura on its body had obviously reached the level of Rizhao, and it was no ordinary Rizhao. This was a Bone Clan cultivator. Another Rizhao. The surrounding cultivators were dumbfounded. Normally, Rizhao was rarely seen, but today, Rizhao cultivators appeared one after another as if they were free. Was this also the hidden Rizhao of the three-world island? Many people were puzzled. However, at this moment, another figure appeared from the teleportation formation, right after Rizhao of the Bone Clan. This guy was not from the Bone Clan, but looked like a demon. He had 2 pitch-black curved horns on his head, and wore a black robe. It was Rizhao again. Moreover, whether it was the Bone Clan or this demon, their auras were not inferior to Ma Bin and He Yun, who were fighting nearby. This undoubtedly meant that they were at the same level as He Yun. As soon as this demon appeared, he cursed, "Ultra-long-distance teleportation is really an unbearable experience." There were many wounds on his face and exposed skin, obviously caused by forceful teleportation. However, he was strong, and these wounds disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. After scanning with his divine sense, this demon raised his eyebrows. "This is the Wanxiang Sea?" He looked around and nodded slightly. How lively. Then he smiled as if there was no one around. "Don't be nervous, we're just passing by. You can continue." After that, he grabbed something to the side as if he had caught something. He put it to the tip of his nose and sniffed it, murmuring, "Let me see where our saintess escaped to." He closed and opened his eyes, and immediately looked in the direction Yaya escaped. "Over there!" Roar! Rizhao of the Bone Clan roared, and turned into a ray of light and flew forward. Ri Zhao of the demon clan followed closely behind, and the two figures disappeared in an instant. Lu Yi looked at this scene quietly, and his expression changed. He finally knew why Yaya left in a hurry. She was obviously avoiding the two Ri Zhao who suddenly appeared. Saintess? Lu Yi recalled what the demon clan had said, and doubts arose in his heart. What kind of force did Yaya come from? If she was the saintess of this force, why was she avoiding Ri Zhao? The only thing Lu Yi could determine was that this force must be very strong, because this kind of ultra-long distance teleportation was not something that anyone could perform. It must have the support of an entire force behind it. As for why this teleportation array appeared here, Lu Yi vaguely guessed that it had something to do with Yaya's unsealing. Before she was unsealed, this powerful force could not detect her existence at all. But today she was forced to be unsealed, and her whereabouts were exposed. So the other party quickly used the remnants of her aura as the source to build an ultra-long distance teleportation array. If Yaya had not run fast, she would have encountered these two strange Ri Zhao, and it would be hard to say whether she would be lucky or not. Looking at it this way, Yaya could have recovered her strength a long time ago, but she had not done so. Instead, she maintained the state of a child to survive on the island of the three realms, because it was better to hide. Until today, when she sensed danger on his side, she unsealed herself and helped him. But that was all she could do. After dealing with Yuan Du, she would immediately escape. With this thought in mind, Lu Yi knew that it was time to retreat. Now the situation in the Wanxiang Sea was chaotic, and the ultra-long distance teleportation array still existed. Who knew if there were more experts coming? This was a place of trouble, and he could not stay for long. Luan Xiao and Yen Miao did not have to worry too much. Yen Miao had a golden conch, which could slightly isolate the water of the Wanxiang Sea. In the past, Lu Yi and Yen Miao had the experience of swimming all the way out of the Wanxiang Sea from the mermaid territory. At that time, thanks to the isolation of the golden conch, she could jump into the sea with Luan Xiao to escape. Then only Ma Bin's side was left, which was not difficult. He Yun was on par with him, and if Ma Bin insisted on jumping into the sea, He Yun could not stop him. When the time came, he would pick up Ma Bin under the sea and meet up with Yen Miao, and they could rush back to the mermaid territory from the sea. As for Ma Bin being eroded by the water of the Wanxiang Sea, he could help to solve it. Just as Lu Yi was planning to do so, something strange happened again. With a splash, a figure jumped out from under the Wanxiang Sea. It was Yuan Du, who had been knocked down into the Wanxiang Sea before. At this moment, his body was shrouded in a black fog, as if he was poisoned. His originally clear spiritual power had become turbid, and his momentum had plummeted. His eyes were filled with bitter resentment, and after appearing, he ignored everyone else and rushed towards Lu Ye's position. He hated Lu Yi to the core. His original plan was going well, but now he was being suppressed everywhere. When he was knocked down into the Wanxiang Sea, although he survived with his powerful cultivation, in that short period of time, he was eroded by the water of the Wanxiang Sea. He would not be able to resolve this level of erosion in his lifetime. In other words, from now on, not only would he have no room to improve, he would not even be able to maintain his original cultivation. As time passed, he might even fall to the sunshine level. So now he only had one thought, and that was to kill Lu Yi to vent the hatred in his heart. If it were not for Lu Yi, he would not have lost face back then. If it were not for Lu Yi, he would not have been targeting the three-world island, and he would not have suffered today. All of this was because of Lu Yi of the three-world island. Yuan Du rushed over, but Lu Yi did not move. He just looked at him expressionlessly. Compared to before, Yuan Du's spiritual power was extremely turbid, and the power of his attacks was not even 30% of before. Lu Yi even had a feeling that he could barely deal with Yuan Du in this state. However, he did not need to do it himself. Luan Xiao and Yen Miao had already joined forces to kill him. The two women arrived first, and as their spiritual power surged, Yuan Du's body was suddenly covered in blood. He was knocked down somewhere on the three-world island, gasping for breath. He lay on the ground in a sorry state, with a big hole in his chest and the top of his head. If it were not for Ri Zhao's powerful vitality, he would have died from such injuries. Chapter 1985. Yuan Du was not dead, but he had fallen into the 10,000 Elephant Sea and was contaminated by its water. Now that he was seriously injured, he was not far from death. Unless he was treated in time, there was still a chance for him to survive. Almost at the same time as Yuan Du was injured, a sorrowful and angry shout suddenly rang out. "Senior brother Yuan Du." Immediately after, several Rizhao's auras descended on the three-world island. They were the other 4 Rizhao guardians, who had rushed over after sensing that something was wrong. It would take some time to get here from the 10,000 Elephant Island, but they still managed to arrive in time. The 4 of them had obviously discussed this beforehand. When they arrived at the battlefield, one of them immediately joined the battle between Ma Bin and He Yin. The 10,000 Elephant Sea hated Ma Bin to the bone. Now that there was a rare opportunity to kill him, they naturally did not want to miss it. Originally, Ma Bin and He Yin were evenly matched in their fight. Any interference from outside could break the balance. Of the remaining 3, one rushed towards Yuan Du, undoubtedly to check on his condition, while the other 2 rushed towards Lu Yi. They were well aware of the cause and effect. Today's incident was caused by Yuan Du's selfishness. He had joined forces with He Yin to attack the three-world island. At first, they did not take it too seriously. As long as Yuan Du was dealt with quickly, the situation would be clean, and there would not be too much trouble. The only trouble they would have to face was Jiu Yan's questioning. But since Yuan Du had decided to do this, he must have been prepared. However, the situation had developed beyond everyone's expectations. A mere three-world island had hidden so many Rizhao, and even harbored the Azure Demon King Ma Bin. It was obvious how ambitious they were. At first, they felt that the three-world island was a little innocent and pitiful, being targeted by Yuan Du, but now, they were incomparably glad. If Yuan Du had not targeted them, they would not have discovered the true face of the three-world island. Who knew when the problems of the three-world island would suddenly erupt? At that time, the commotion would be even greater than today's. Although the current situation was chaotic, they only needed to take down Lu Yi and deal with Ma Bin. 2 Rizhao guardians attacking 1 Yu Yao showed their determination to quickly take down Lu Yi. "Junior brother, run!" Wan Xiao shouted. Together with Yin Miao, they met the 2 Rizhao guardians head-on. But how could the 2 girls be a match for them? They were at a disadvantage as soon as they exchanged blows. The situation was precarious. Lu Ye's expression. There was no end to this. He had tried several times to order Rizhao to evacuate, but he was interrupted by various accidents. At this point, whether it was Ma Bin, Wan Xiao, or Yin Miao, it was not easy for them to evacuate. Their side no longer had any combat power that they could bring out. On the other hand, there was still Rizhao from Wanxiangxi who did not participate in the battle. He was currently checking on Yuan Du's injuries. Putting aside the fact that Luan Xiao and Misty Smoke were no match for the enemy, Ma Bin's condition had just improved. If the battle went on for too long, it would be difficult for him to hold on. At that time, even Ma Bin would be defeated. Sunshine, sure enough, he still needed to be promoted to Sunshine to have the ability to participate in such a battle. He couldn't just stand here and watch helplessly. Lu Yi gently clenched his fist, and his magic power began to surge. Although it was regretful, there were many things in life that did not go according to one's wishes. Only by overcoming the current crisis would one have the qualifications to talk about the future. Just as he was about to cut off all means of retreat and advance to Rizhao, a panicked aura suddenly enveloped him, followed by a powerful divine sense attack. Lu Yi only felt a buzzing in his head. If it were not for the 7-colored divine lotus stabilizing his divine soul, his mind would have been injured. Raising his head, he saw that one of the 2 sunshine guards that Luan Xiao and Yin Miao had joined hands with was already charging towards him. Lu Yi recognized this person. It seemed to be Gu Shi from the Tianyin realm. It was this person who had just used his soul power to attack him. After all, Luan Xiao and Misty Smoke's strength was much lower. The 2 women wanted to join forces to stop the other 2, but it was impossible. In just a few breaths of time, Gu Shi escaped, leaving the other person to fight the two of them alone. Even so, the two women had to fight with all their strength. Malignant tumor, I can't let you live. Gu Shi looked at Lu Yi, his face full of murderous intent. It was obvious that he wanted to kill him. Yuan Du and Lu Yi had a grudge against each other, so he targeted Lu Yi and the Three-World Island. Gu Shi simply didn't like Lu Yi and the Three-World Island. Now that he had the chance, he naturally wouldn't show mercy. Now that Gu Shi was attacking, how could Lu Yi stay where he was? He turned around to escape. He could enter the sea at any time, so he had long been prepared. But at this moment, somewhere in the Three-World Island, a dazzling golden light suddenly shot out. The golden light was extremely fast, and there was no warning before it was shot out. Not only did Lu Yi not notice it, but even Rizhao like Gu Shi didn't react at all. The golden light hit Gu Shi's body. Lu Ye's figure paused. He didn't expect that at this time, there would still be someone on the Three-World Island who dared to attack Gu Shi. Who was it? However, when he saw Gu Shi's state clearly, he couldn't help but be stunned. Because at this moment, a layer of golden light had appeared on Gu Shi's body for some unknown reason. The golden light was densely packed with the imprints of ancient coins. The shape and appearance of these coins looked a little familiar. At the same time, the anger and murderous intent on Gu Shi's face quickly disappeared, replaced by astonishment and panic. He maintained his flying posture, but his entire body was shrouded in a layer of golden light. This golden light had a terrifying binding power, rendering him immobile. He couldn't even channel the arcane energy in his body. Then, under Lu Ye's confused gaze, Gu Shi fell several dozen feet in front of him. Due to inertia, he slowly came to a stop a short distance away. Even after falling to the ground, Gu Shi still maintained his flying posture, looking extremely comical. Lu Yi abruptly turned his head and saw a familiar figure standing at the pill room's location, quietly watching him. Wuxia. Lu Ye's eyes widened. Why was she here? And when did she come back? He didn't notice at all. Moreover, he had just gone to the sea to visit her a few days ago. At that time, she showed no signs of waking up, so he didn't expect her to come back now. At this moment, Wuxia was standing there quietly, holding a golden-toed pet beast in her arms. Under the hazy golden halo, her expression was serene, but there was an awe-inspiring and sacred feeling about her. Needless to say, the golden light that hit Gu Shi just now must have come from her means. And the source of this means came from that strange ancient coin. Back then, Lu Yi had even used that ancient coin to imprison a sunshine-level star beast under the sea. It was obvious how powerful the ancient coin was. Lu Yi even suspected that it might be a starry sky treasure. Otherwise, it couldn't possibly have such ridiculous power. Back then, when he set off for the Yin Yang Great Millstone, he gave the ancient coin to Wuxia for safekeeping. It could be considered as giving her a way to protect herself on the Thousand Crescent Sea. At the same time, it was also a trump card for Three-World Island. However, one day, when Wuxia was playing with the ancient coin, she was swallowed by her pet beast. Since then, the pet beast and its owner, Wuxia, had been sealed in a piece of amber. Lu Yi didn't know what happened to cause this, but after all these years, Wuxia's vitality still remained, and her strength seemed to be growing stronger all the time. When she reappeared today, Lu Yi sensed from afar that Wuxia's aura was so vigorous that it was not inferior to his own. This was outrageous. He was now a late-stage Moon Jade Realm cultivator, but Wuxia's aura was not inferior to his. Didn't that mean she also had the same cultivation level? The reason his cultivation level could rise so quickly was because of the innate skill tree. As for Wuxia, the ancient coin could also devour the Thousand Crescent Sea's water. She and her pet beast were sealed in the amber and placed under the sea by Lu Yi. All these years, she had been constantly devouring the Thousand Crescent Sea's water, so it wasn't strange for her to grow so much. The only thing that puzzled Lu Yi was that Wuxia's gaze was a little wooden, even a little arrogant. But with the current situation, he didn't have time to think too deeply about it. Looking down at Gu Shi, who was not far in front of him, Lu Ye's expression changed. He had already decided to advance to Sunshine on the spot, even if it meant leaving behind regrets. because only by advancing to sunshine could he participate in the battle and have a chance to change the situation. But what if he could advance without leaving any regrets? It wasn't that he didn't have the ability, but his experience in the Azura field and Su Yuqing and Ma Bin's previous warnings made him unwilling to do so. Or rather, he didn't have the opportunity before. But now the opportunity was right in front of him. Who is it? An angry shout interrupted Lu Ye's thoughts. A figure flew up and looked warily in Hua Xi's direction. It was Chen Xuanba of the High Heavens continent. He had gone to check on Yuan Du's condition at the first opportunity, because among the several Sunshine Guardians, he had the best personal relationship with Yuan Du, so he was naturally the most concerned about his injuries. After investigating, he was shocked. Although Yuan Du was not dead, his injuries were serious and shocking. He could tell at a glance that even if Yuan Du was lucky enough to survive, it would be difficult for him to maintain his sunshine cultivation in the future. The corrosion of the Thousand Crescent Sea's water was simply unsolvable. The only thing he could do was to give Yuan Du a large pill to preserve his life for the time being. But then he saw a scene that made his soul jump out of his body. After an inexplicable golden light shot out, Gu Shi, who was also a sunshine guardian like him, was imprisoned on the spot and fell straight to the ground. It wasn't until he was in mid-air that he saw clearly who had attacked him. It was a woman who looked extremely noble and holy in the golden light, holding a golden toad-like pet beast in her arms. Scanning with his divine sense, Chen Xuanba frowned, because he could clearly sense that this woman's cultivation was only at Yu Yao's level. If that was the case, then what was the deal with the golden light that could imprison sunshine? He thought another sunshine had appeared on the three-world island. If it wasn't sunshine, then it must be the power of a magic weapon. But what kind of magic weapon could be so terrifying? Chapter 1986. Before Chen Xuanba could figure it out, a golden light flashed in his field of vision, just like the one he saw earlier. He was shocked and wanted to dodge, but it was too late. The speed of the golden light was beyond his imagination. Even someone as strong as him had no room to dodge. He even had a feeling that once the golden light appeared, he would definitely be hit. No matter how hard he tried to dodge, it would be useless. Chen Xuanba was hit directly. In the next moment, his body sank and his mana was sealed. Just like Gu Shi, he fell straight to the ground. All the spectating cultivators were stunned. Today's conflict on the three-world island had one unforeseen event after another. It was simply too much for the eyes to take in. The strength of three-world island's hidden forces was also shocking. Before today, everyone thought that even if three-world island was a top-notch spiritual island, as long as Rizhao attacked, it would be completely unstoppable. But in reality, at this point in the battle, the 5 Rizhao of the Wanxiang Sea had attacked together, but they only managed to break one of three-world island's protective arrays. They could not do anything to three-world island at all. Such a foundation was simply unheard of. What was even more inconceivable was how three-world island was able to hide so much power under the watchful eyes of the Rizhao guards. The sudden turn of events shocked the other group that was fighting near the three-world island. It was Mu Qing's battle against Luan Xiao and Miao Yan. Originally, Mu Qing could only defend herself against the 2 new Rizhao, Luan Xiao and Miao Yan. But after noticing what happened to Gu Shi and Chen Xuanba, she had no choice but to conserve some of her strength, just in case. She was even quietly moving the battlefield further away to avoid being killed by Hua Xi. Because of this, Luan Xiao and Miao Yan's situation became much better. As for Ma Bin, He Yun, and Mo Wen and Li's battle, they had already fought tens of thousands of miles away. The 3 of them were giving it their all, but they did not notice the changes on Three-World Island. In the Three-World Island, Lu Yi walked step by step towards Gu Shi, who was lying on the ground but still in a strange flying posture. He looked down at him with an indifferent expression. Why? Why do you have to force me? He never had much ambition. He only occupied the Three-World Island because he wanted to establish a foothold in the myriad phenomenon sea and earn enough cultivation resources for the cultivators of the 3 worlds. He only needed to wait for a few more years, gather enough resources, and polish his Dharma source to perfection. Once he achieved sunshine, he would leave the Wanxiang Sea. From the time he conquered Baiwei to the time he defeated Zixian, everything he did was within the rules of the Wanxiang Sea. He never had the intention to break the rules. Even if Luan Xiao and Yin Miao were promoted to Rizhao, they still stayed obediently in the mermaid territory. The reason why the Myriad Elephant Sea was able to maintain its prosperity for so many years was because of these rules and restrictions. Rashly breaking them would not benefit anyone. However, while he abided by the rules, the person who set the rules was not willing to abide by them. This was very comical. If the person who set the rules wasn't willing to abide by them, then someone else could only set the rules. The affairs of the world are truly unpredictable. Lu Yi sighed. His entire body glowed with a bloody light. Looking at the once lofty and unapproachable Rizhao, who was now lying motionless in front of him, he suddenly realized that all the injustices in this world must be fiercely resisted. The sea of blood rolled and spread out, covering his and Gu Shi's figures. Outsiders could no longer see the situation inside. Lu Yi reached out to grab Gu Shi's head. Gu Shi seemed to sense that something was wrong. Ever since he was in prison, he had been waiting for this opportunity. He fiercely activated the power of his divine spirit and used a divine spirit secret technique. Lu Yi vaguely saw an incomparably sharp sword light slashing towards him. However, the strange thing was that the sword light was not physical. After it cut into his body, he did not feel any pain. His expression was slightly dazed at the same time. In the deity sea, the sword light was rampant. However, under the wash of the rainbow light of the divine lotus, the rampant sword light quickly lost its power and disappeared. Only then did Lu Yi come to his senses. He felt pain in his head. A divine spirit secret technique. Lu Yi understood. It seemed that the method Hua Ci inherited from the ancient coin could seal a cultivator's magic power and physical body. However, it could not seal a cultivator's divine spirit. That was why Gu Shi was able to use a divine spirit secret technique. If it was an ordinary Yu Yao, her divine spirit would definitely be injured. She might even die on the spot. Fortunately, Lu Yi had the divine lotus to protect his deity sea. His divine spirit was slightly damaged. After all, that was a full-strength attack from Rizhao. However, it was not a big deal. He only needed to rest and he would recover. Gu Shi's eyes were filled with shock. He could not understand why his secret technique did not work. In the next instant, Lu Yi's palm landed on his head. The roots of the talent tree quickly spread and extended. Lu Yi's voice rang in his ears. Die! Gu Shi's eyes suddenly widened, as if they were about to explode, and become bloodshot in an instant. This was because when Lu Yi attacked, an indescribable pain swept through his entire body. He clearly felt his blood magic power, and even his soul being crazily devoured by an unknown force. In contrast, Lu Yi's face was filled with joy. His eyes were tightly shut, and his body could not help but tremble. In a previous experience in the Azura field, Lu Yi had devoured many shadows. He had also experienced what it felt like to use the talent tree to devour living creatures. However, only now did he realize that devouring shadows was completely different from devouring real living creatures. The fatal pleasure was several times greater than the former. Especially when Gu Shi was a Rizhao. He almost sank into it in an instant, unable to extricate himself. Fortunately, he was prepared for this. His tongue was bitten off. Intense pain spread through his body. The taste of blood in his mouth made Lu Yi's consciousness slightly sober. His strong physique allowed his injured tongue to quickly recover. Once again it was bitten off, this cycle repeated over and over again. Lu Yi's expression was ferocious and terrifying. Blood flowed from his mouth like a malicious spirit. Gu Shi's aura rapidly weakened. From Rizhao to Yu Yao, to Xingxiu, his vitality dimmed, and his aura withered. In just a moment, his whole body became dry and withered. His eyes were wide open, and he had completely lost his vitality. The sea of blood roared. Gu Shi's corpse was washed away by the sea of blood, and turned into powder. Only a few storage rings were left behind. Not enough. Lu Yi sensed his own body. His qi and blood were surging violently, and his magic power was surging to the extreme. His damaged spirit had already recovered, but his spiritual source had yet to reach a perfect level. In the sea of blood, his gaze turned to another direction. It was where Yuan Du and Chen Xuanba were. Since I've chosen this path, even if it's wrong, I'll continue. With this thought in mind, his body moved. The sea of blood roiled and soon enveloped Yuan Du and Chen Xuanba's location. Of the two Rizhao, one was hanging on by his life because of the effect of the great pill, while the other was hit by the golden light of the treasure coin. Like Gushi, he could not move. Suddenly falling into the sea of blood, they were both shocked. They did not notice Gushi's death. It's Luya. He really is a blood breed. Yuan Du coughed lightly. His face was pale, and he instantly understood who had done this. At first, he had decided to frame Lu Yi with a blood breed, so that he would have a reason to attack the three-world island. In the end, the blood breed, who had agreed in advance, suddenly changed sides. This made him realize that his framing might be true. Otherwise, he could not explain why the blood breed would do such a thing. The betrayal of a blood breed was undoubtedly a cover for one of their own. How ugly! A voice came. Yuan Du's expression changed. He turned around and saw Lu Yi standing beside him. Yuan Du was furious. He was about to attack, but as soon as he circulated his magic power, he felt a sharp pain all over his body. He had no strength at all. Why are you targeting the three-world island? We're just a group of outsiders, a group of poor people struggling to survive in the Wanxiang Sea. Lu Yi looked at Yuan Du. The entire Wanxiang Sea is filled with people like you. Can't you see that Rizhao is high and mighty? Yuan Du snorted coldly. Immoral people are not worthy of high positions. Boy, after what happened to the three-world island today, you have no future to speak of. Moreover, you dared to harbor Ma Bin. If this matter spreads, even Juyin will not tolerate you. If you know what's good for you, obediently stretch out your neck, and then hand over the treasure that connects the merfolk's territory. Perhaps you can still save the disciples of the three-world island. Immoral. Luya's eyes flashed. He suddenly slapped Yuan Du. The slap sent Yuan Du flying into the air. Half of his face was swollen, as expected of Rizhao's physical body. If it were Yu Yao, her head would have exploded from this slap. However, Yuan Du only suffered minor injuries. Landing heavily on the ground, Yuan Du stared in disbelief at Lu Yi, who was walking towards him step by step. He never imagined that he would one day be humiliated like this in front of Yu Yao. The reverse blood flow attacked his heart. He spat out a mouthful of blood and his injuries worsened. You think you're worthy of being called immoral? Lu Yi stepped forward, grabbed Yuan Du by the neck, and lifted him up. His face was right in front of Yuan Du's, and he stared at him coldly. Who do you think you are? Yuan Du struggled with all his might. However, a look of horror soon appeared on his face as he screamed in pain. He felt something extra in his body. Then his essence, energy, and spirit were being devoured. Rizhao's foundation was rapidly draining away. However, Luya's voice still echoed in his ears. By the way, why aren't you saying anything? Why are you targeting the three-world island? We didn't provoke you in the beginning. We even wanted to visit your mountain. Oh right, Old Tang went to your palace and was rejected by you. When Old Tang came back, he was very angry. Are you happy targeting the three-world island? Now that things have gotten to this point, it's hard to clean up. What is this called? You reap what you sow. Speak. You. Why? What? Did? No. Speak. Speak. Lu Yi flung the noodle body in his hand and blinked. Only then did he realize that Yuan Du was already dead. It's still not enough. Lu Yi flung the corpse away. Then, he looked to the side and saw Chen Xuanba staring at him in horror. He grinned and said softly, "Don't be afraid." Chapter 1987. Outside the three-world island, over 100 Yu Yao gathered in one place with bewildered expressions. They had been summoned by Yuan. A small number of them were Yu Yao from the first Yuan realm, but most of them were Yu Yao guardians from the various spiritual islands. However, since they were willing to accept Yuan Du's summons, they were more or less related to him. The 100 Yu Yao were led by Yuan Cheng. Yuan Du had brought them here to borrow their strength, to break through the three world islands' protective array. After all, as Rizhao, there was no need for him to do something as trivial as breaking the array himself. However, the blood kindred had betrayed him, and He Yin had attacked. Yuan Du had no choice but to cooperate and quickly break through the three world islands' protective array. After that, the Rizhao appeared one after another. The 100 or so Yu Yao were completely useless. However, they didn't leave. Instead, they stayed outside the three world island and watched. The current situation was treacherous. Ma Bin was fighting against He Yin and Mo Wenli. Luan Xiao and Yin Miao were fighting against Mu Qing. Yuan Du was severely injured and his condition was unknown. Chen Xuanba and Gu Shi had also disappeared into the blood sea after being hit by the golden light. Yuan Cheng looked at the churning blood sea. His heart was filled with fear. He even had the urge to flee from this place. He could vaguely sense that the situation this time was too big. It had far exceeded Yuan Du's expectations. However, he was still a descendant of Yuan Du. If he fled now, there would be no place for him in the 10,000 elephant sea in the future. Therefore, he hesitated for a moment. Then he gritted his teeth and shouted, "Friends, follow me. Kill Lu Yi and save the guardians." As soon as he finished speaking, he was the first to charge into the blood sea. Most of the 100 or so Yu Yao hesitated for a moment before following him. A small number of them hesitated. However, given the current situation, they had no choice but to retreat. Lu Yi of the Three Realm Island was indeed renowned. Now he had even unleashed a blood sea secret technique of such a scale. However, he was still only Yu Yao. He was only one person. With over 100 of them working together, how could they not be able to take him down? Moreover, there were still 3 Ricarius in the blood sea. They did not believe that these 3 Ricarius had completely lost the ability to resist. Even if they were trapped by that mysterious golden light, it would not be that easy for Yu Yao to kill Ricarius. Perhaps Lu Yi of the Three World Island had already been captured by one of the Ricarius. They only needed to put on an act now, and in the future, they would gain the friendship of the Ricarius protectors. More than 100 figures fell into the sea of blood one after another, like stones sinking into the sea, without the slightest splash of blood. In the blood sea, Lu Yi grabbed Chen Xuanba's body. The arrogant sunshine cultivator was now like a dried fish. His essence, qi, and spirit had been sucked dry, and his vitality had dissipated. He had followed in the footsteps of Gu Shi and Yuan Du indeed. It would not be easy for Yu Yao to kill Rizhao. Everything else aside, Rizhao's physique was incomparably strong. Lu Yi had to expend a lot of effort to defeat Lionheart, because his physique was too strong. Yuan Du and the others had been in Rizhao's league for many years. In terms of physique, they were many times stronger than Lionheart. Even if they were trapped and unable to resist, Lu Yi would have to use the sword draw, or the great windmill secret technique, to have a chance to kill them. However, the talent tree's devouring was unreasonable. A strong physique could not stop the roots of the talent tree from entering. At this moment, Lu Ye's eyes were closed. After devouring 3 sunshine cultivators in succession, he could vaguely feel that something was wrong with his body. After examining it closely, a look of surprise appeared on his face. On one of the branches of the talent tree, a flower had unknowingly bloomed. The flower was about to wither, and a small black fruit was in the process of growing at the base of the flower. For some reason, when Lu Yi saw the black fruit, he felt an inexplicable sense of unease. There was no reason for it, but he could feel that once the black fruit matured, something bad would happen to him. He thought of the previous Dao Tree successor Chao Nian. From the looks of it, Chao Nian must have also gone through this stage. The great change in his temperament should be related to this black fruit. The Dao Tree could burn everything in the world, but it could not burn the 7 emotions and 6 desires of living beings. These emotions that could not be burned gathered on the talent tree, bloomed and bore fruit. When it matured, it would completely change a person's temperament. Even at this moment, the black fruit had just taken shape and was far from maturing. Lu Yi could feel that his temperament had changed. It seemed that he was more easily angered and violent. Previously, when he was training in the Azura field, he had tried to devour many shadows. However, that training did not have much of an effect on him. Lu Yi had always thought that the rumors were wrong or exaggerated. Only today did he realize that devouring shadows was completely different from devouring real living beings. This made him slightly wary. He pulled out his consciousness and sensed his spiritual source. It was not perfect yet, but it was not far away. The foundation of the 3 sunshine cultivators had greatly improved the quality of his spiritual source. At this rate, if he could devour 2 more sunshine cultivators. When this thought arose, it was difficult to suppress. At this moment, Lu Yi suddenly sensed that a large amount of life force had intruded into his sea of blood. The sea of blood was formed by his own blood and qi. Even the slightest change in it could not escape his detection. Thus, after a moment's thought, Lu Yi knew what had happened. This is really... Lu Yi tossed Chen Xuanba's corpse aside and took a step forward. His figure had already disappeared. There was a path to heaven, but you refused to take it. There was no door to hell, but you insisted on barging in. Ancestor! Ancestor, where are you? Within the sea of blood, Yuancheng continuously shouted, his face filled with fear and unease. He had brought 100 Yu Yao here, but now he could not see a single person beside him. The viscous sea of blood around him made it difficult for him to move, and even the flow of his transcendence energy was much more difficult. However, that was fine. He believed that Yuan Du was still alive, and should be somewhere at this moment. As long as he could meet up with Yuan Du, he would be able to protect himself. In addition, the 2 sunshine cultivators, Gu Shi and Chen Xuanba, were also in this sea of blood. Lu Yi only had 1 Yu Yao. No matter what, he had no ability to kill 3 sunshine cultivators. He did not know what that golden light that could seal sunshine was, but the sunshine cultivators would definitely be able to break free quickly. At that time, they would be able to easily break through the sea of blood and allow this world to see the light of day once more. As he looked around, he suddenly stepped on something. He hurriedly looked down. What he saw instantly turned into a look of shock and horror. This was because the thing on the ground was a corpse, and it was a desiccated corpse at that. The corpse's face vaguely resembled Chen Xuanba's, and even the clothes on it were Chen Xuanba's. No, impossible. Yuan Cheng hurriedly took a few steps back, unwilling to believe what he was seeing. That Chen Xuanba was sunshine, so how could he have died so silently? Suddenly, Yuan Cheng bumped into something. He turned his head and saw that in the sea of blood, a figure had appeared behind him at some point. This figure was silently staring at him with a pair of scarlet eyes. That gaze. It was like a hungry wolf that had just seen a delicious meal. Luiya! Yuan Cheng was shocked. He immediately tried to circulate his transcendence energy, but a figure flashed in front of him. Pain shot through his body, and his consciousness blurred. He had just become a Yu Yao not long ago. How could he be a match for Luiya? In the next instant, an indescribable pain shot through his body, causing Yuan Cheng to cry out in pain. After a few breaths, his voice dissipated. Luiya tossed Yuan Cheng's corpse aside, and his figure disappeared into the sea of blood. He muttered in dissatisfaction, "Too weak." He had finally discovered a pattern. The stronger the cultivator, the greater the benefits he would receive after devouring them. The 3 Yu Yao who had entered the sea of blood had greatly improved his transcendence energy. However, the Yu Yao who had entered the sea of blood were much weaker. For example, Yuan Cheng, who had just become a Yu Yao not long ago. The improvements he received to his transcendence energy were practically negligible. This was most likely related to the quality of their transcendence energy. The higher the quality of the transcendence energy he devoured, the greater the benefits he would receive. The effects of devouring Yu Yao were not as good as Yu Yao's. Fortunately, there were many of them. More than 100 Yu Yao were scattered all over the sea of blood. They couldn't find their enemies, nor could they see their companions. The only thing they could do was continuously circulate their power and bombard their surroundings. This was also the best way to deal with the sea of blood. In the end, the sea of blood was also a kind of secret technique. Since it was a secret technique, it naturally had a limit. As long as one could break through this limit, they would be able to break through it. In the beginning, Wuxia's sea of blood was indeed turbulent under the ferocious attacks of the Yu Yao. From the outside, it looked like it could shatter at any moment. However, after enduring the most dangerous early stages, as time passed, the sea of blood became more and more stable, gradually calming down. Silently, the vitality of the Yu Yao dissipated one after another, and the cultivators who had entered the sea of blood with Yuan Cheng perished one after another. In their place, Wuxia's transcendence energy continuously approached perfection. The continuous devouring caused him to lose himself in thought. At first, he still remembered to occasionally check on the changes in the black fruit on the innate talent tree, constantly keeping an eye on himself. However, as his transcendence energy became more and more complete, and the pleasure of devouring continued to deepen, he completely forgot about everything else. There was only one thought in his mind: to devour everything. After an unknown period of time, there was not a single living being left in the sea of blood. Just as Wuxia was about to head toward the closest and densest source of vitality, his body suddenly shuddered, and he froze on the spot. In this instant, it was as if some extremely miraculous change had occurred in his body. It was precisely this change that had affected his mind and interrupted his instinctive plan. He was abruptly shocked. His condition just now was very strange. When he checked his innate talent tree again, he discovered that the original flower had long since disappeared. The black fruit had already grown to the size of a fist, and its black color had deepened considerably. In fact, it was even glowing. This thing was already not far away from ripening. A wave of lingering fear washed over him. Fortunately, the changes in his body had brought him back to his senses. Otherwise, if this had continued, he was afraid that he would have followed in Chao Nian's footsteps, never to return from that path of no return. That was something he absolutely could not accept. I can't devour anymore. He secretly made up his mind. Only now did he have the time to investigate the changes that had occurred in his body. End of chapter. Chapter 1988. Actually, Lu Yi didn't need to check. He already had a hunch. Even though he wasn't actively doing anything, his magic power was flowing madly through his body at an unprecedented speed. His spiritual aperture's magic source was also burning hot. He had perfected his magic source. Lu Yi felt a chill run down his spine. It hadn't been easy. When he was in the early and middle stages of the Moon Jade realm, he didn't have a clear idea of what to do. When he realized that he had to polish his magic source to perfection in order to condense the flower of qi, he was already in the late stages of the Moon Jade realm. Only then did he set off for the Azura domain. He obtained many benefits in the Azura domain. When he returned to the Wanxiang Sea, he bought some, and Jiuyin gave him some. He calmed his mind and sensed that his magic power was flowing faster and faster. Lu Yi could faintly feel a burning sensation between his brows. With his experience of condensing the flower of the body, this abnormal change excited him. This was clearly a sign that the flower of qi was about to condense. He didn't move or react, only allowing his magic power to flow. Time passed. When the scorching heat between his eyebrows reached a limit, something seemed to have suddenly appeared. In the next moment, the rapidly circulating magic power slowly calmed down. Lu Yi hurriedly opened his eyes and flipped his hand. He took out a mirror-like magic treasure from his storage ring and looked at it. Sure enough, he saw the mark of a crescent moon slowly fading between his brows. The flower of qi had been condensed. This undoubtedly meant that he had reached the peak of the Moon Jade realm. He had passed 2 stages of the 3-flower art. Now only the flower of God was left. But before that, his magic power was abundant, his qi and blood were condensed. The Moon Jade realm and the constellation realm were flawless. Today was the day of the sun. Under normal circumstances, a cultivator would naturally choose a suitable and stable environment to break through to the next realm. At the very least, they had to ensure that they wouldn't be disturbed by others during the process and avoid external factors that could lead to failure. However, Lu Yi had no choice. In order to reach this step, he didn't even hesitate to devour the sun of the Wanxiang Sea. The Moon Jade realm was so that he wouldn't have any regrets. Now that the flower of qi had been condensed, he naturally had to break through to the next realm. Besides, he didn't need a suitable and stable environment. He could break through to the next realm at any time a long time ago. The shackles of life and death for ordinary cultivators could be broken at any time for him. This was the benefit of having a solid foundation, as well as the convenience of reaching the peak of his previous realm. He emptied his mind and no longer restrained his body. When his qi and blood surged and his dermic powers surged, the shackles had already shattered. Luya's body suddenly felt light. Previously, he had devoured the foundations of 3 Rizhao cultivators and 100 Yuyao cultivators. Although his cultivation source had been polished to perfection, what followed was a feeling of fullness. This was because he had devoured not only the cultivation sources of those cultivators, but also their blood essence, transcendence energy, and even their souls, everything. With the accumulation of so many cultivators in Lu Ye's body, it was only natural for Yu Yao to feel bloated. During this period of time, he had even channeled his excess power into his own blood sea. This was also the reason why his blood sea was able to withstand the frenzied attacks of the 100 Yu Yao clones. But at this moment, when that layer of shackles was broken, all the feelings of fullness disappeared without a trace. A joy that was even more intense than when he devoured living beings rose in his heart. Unlike before, this joy would not make him sink into depravity. Instead, it made his mind clear. Lu Yi felt as if his body had undergone an indescribable baptism and sublimation from the inside out. His magic power instantly became several times more vigorous, and it continued to increase. Not only his dermic powers, but his qi and blood as well. Lu Ye's flesh and blood were wriggling, becoming more solid and sturdy. This was undoubtedly a huge change brought about by the advancement of a major realm. The reason why Rizhao's physique was so strong, even for cultivators who were originally dermic cultivators, was because of this baptism during the advancement of a realm. This was the transformation of one's dermic powers from the inside out, after many years of accumulation. His spirit sea was also rapidly expanding. The seawater became more solid and deep, and the strength of his soul increased by leaps and bounds. Lu Yi could feel that this change would continue until it gradually stabilized. At that time, his Rizhao realm would be completely stabilized. He clenched his fists lightly. His strength had undergone a tremendous change. He didn't know what level he was at now. After all, he had just advanced and hadn't fought with Rizhao yet. The only thing he knew was that even though he had just advanced, he was definitely not comparable to an ordinary cultivator in the early stages of Rizhao realm. He really wanted to find someone to fight. He wanted to have a fight where fists met flesh and swords saw blood. With this thought in mind, he couldn't hold himself back. Lu Yi couldn't help but frown. It seemed that the black fruit on the talent tree wasn't fully ripe yet, but it was still affecting his temperament. He needed to be vigilant. Suddenly, a strange movement came from his waist. Lu Yi looked down and muttered to himself. Then he unsheathed his blade. "You're awake?" he asked softly. His blade was transformed from the qi of the soldier tribe when it swallowed the Pan Shan blade. All this time, the qi had been in a deep slumber. This was also a characteristic of the soldier tribe. They were an extremely ancient tribe. They didn't have a physical body and could only transform into various kinds of weapons. If a living creature recognized them as its master, the soldier tribe would fall into a deep slumber. Only when the master died in battle would the soldier tribe awaken again and wait for the next master. Lu Yi didn't activate the Pan Shan blade just now, but it reacted. This made Lu Yi think that the qi had awakened. But under his perception, the Pan Shan blade was still the same. The qi didn't show any signs of awakening. If that was the case, then what was the strange movement just now? After pondering for a moment, Lu Yi suddenly thought of something. He immediately channeled his transcendence energy into the Pan Shan blade. The Pan Shan blade trembled slightly. Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. He realized that his guess was correct. The Pan Shan blade was about to be unsealed. It had been unsealed once before. It was when he first obtained the qi after advancing from a constellation to a Yu Yao. When he first obtained the qi, It was only a spiritual treasure. When he advanced to a Yu Yao, it became a transcendent artifact. This wasn't an advancement, because the true Feng blade was of extremely high quality. After it recognized Lu Yi as its master, it planted layers of seals on itself based on Lu Ye's strength at that time. Only when Lu Ye's strength increased would the seals be unsealed. Now that Lu Yi was sunshine, the Qi's seals would be unsealed again. This made Lu Yi secretly look forward to it. The Qi was already a transcendent artifact. If it was unsealed again, would it become a supreme artifact? Would the Qi be a supreme artifact? Lu Yi didn't know, but he would find out soon. He channeled his transcendence energy into the Pan Shan blade, causing some changes to it. But this wasn't enough. Lu Yi quickly understood the reason. Sunshine was the cultivation of a god. Only channeling his transcendence energy wouldn't be enough. With this thought in mind, he wrapped the Pan Shan blade with his divine sense. The Pan Shan blade trembled more and more. In just a few breaths of time, a dim light flashed across the Pan Shan blade. An extremely sharp aura emanated from the blade, disappearing in a flash. Lu Yi looked at the Pan Shan saber, that had been unsealed once again, and frowned slightly. This was different from what he'd imagined. The Pan Shan blade didn't seem to be a supreme artifact. Compared to before, the blade didn't seem to have changed too much. But he flicked his finger on the Pan Shan blade. A bloody gash appeared on his hand and blood flowed out. The Pan Shan blade seemed to have become sharper and more durable. This undoubtedly made it more suitable for sunshine cultivators. He wouldn't have to worry about the blade being damaged in battle. It would also be more convenient for him to kill his enemies. If the Pan Shan blade was a high-grade transcendent artifact before, then it should be a top-grade transcendent artifact now. Lu Yi was slightly disappointed that it wasn't a supreme artifact, but he could still accept it. He exhaled softly. The flower of Qi had been condensed, and sunshine had advanced. Now it was time to end everything. With a thought, the sea of blood surrounding him retracted. Lu Ye's figure appeared in the blink of an eye. 3 of the 5 sunshine guardians of the Wanxiang Sea had died. Only 2 remained, including Zixian's He Yin. There were 3 sunshine cultivators to deal with. Previously, he only had Ma Bin, Luan Xiao and Yin Miao. They were evenly matched. Now that he was here, he should be able to change the situation. Right, there was still Huaxi. With her on the Wanxiang Sea, no amount of sunshine would be enough to kill. Lu Yi was about to look in Huaxi's direction, but he couldn't help but frown. He turned his head and looked in the direction of the 3 World Islands Trade District. That place was supposed to be peaceful. Even when Yuan Du attacked the 3 World Island, he didn't intend to affect that area. Too many powers were involved there. If the battle really did affect that area, he would offend too many people. But at this moment, the trade district was filled with wails and cries of war. Countless cultivators were fighting there. The streets were littered with corpses and minced meat. What was going on? Lu Yi didn't understand. Even if the incident in the 3 Worlds Island was rather big, the business district should not have been affected. And yet, the business district was already in a state of chaos. Countless shops had been destroyed. Lu Yi even saw cultivators looting goods in the process. He turned his head and saw that the cultivators around the 3 World Island had disappeared. Even the sunshine cultivators who were fighting were gone. He was the only one standing in the air in the area where the cultivators were stationed. Where was Huaxi? Lu Ye's heart tightened. He vaguely realized that during the half-day when he was concentrating on condensing the flower of Qi and advancing to sunshine, something had happened. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so chaotic. Looking at the pill room, Huaxi, who was supposed to be standing there, was nowhere to be seen. Lu Ye's expression changed. He hurriedly took out a sound talisman to send a message to Huaxi. At this moment, there was a sound not far away, and a familiar aura came. He hurriedly turned his head and saw the water of the Wanxiang Sea churning. A familiar figure appeared in his field of vision. Who else could it be but Huaxi? End of chapter. Chapter 1989. Huaxi stood quietly on the sea beside the 3 World Island. Lu Yi took a closer look and realized that she wasn't standing on the sea, but rather on the back of her pet beast. Her pet beast, which possessed the Pishio bloodline, had shrunk to the size of a table, just enough for Wuxia to stand on. Their eyes met, and Lu Yi hurriedly flew towards her. Just as he was about to ask about the situation here, Lu Yi couldn't help but be taken aback when he met Wuxia's eyes. Because her eyes gave him a very unfamiliar feeling. There wasn't the slightest hint of joy from a long-awaited reunion, only surprise and uncertainty. She looked like she didn't recognize him at all. "You, what's wrong?" Lu Yi asked nervously. Wuxia's expression was a little blank as she shook her head and said, "I don't know, I've forgotten a lot of things." "Who are you? Why do I feel like you're very close and important? But I can't remember who you are." Lu Yi's expression stiffened and his face twitched. "Don't joke around." Wuxia didn't have any other bad habits, but she liked to play pranks. Lu Yi was deeply affected by this. Back then, when he saw her holding a child, he even mistakenly thought that he had a child, but it turned out that it was actually someone else's child. At that time, Wuxia even tried her best to show him her motherly love. Wuxia didn't say anything. She just looked at him quietly, her beautiful eyes as deep as the abyss. Lu Yi's heart was in turmoil. He reached out and grabbed one of her hands. Circulating his magic power, he spread out his divine sense and carefully examined her. A moment later, Lu Yi looked at the woman in front of him with a complicated expression. "Do you really not remember me?" There was nothing wrong with Wuxia's body. In fact, it was very good. Her magic power was incomparably pure, and her foundation was solid. What was even more incredible was that her cultivation had reached the late moon jade stage, only one step away from the sunshine stage. He couldn't help but wonder if Wuxia was playing with him. But after thinking about it carefully, Wuxia must have undergone some unknown changes during the year she was sealed. Otherwise, her strength couldn't have improved so much. Perhaps these changes had affected her memory. Wuxia shook her head slowly. "It's okay." Lu Yi smiled and held her hand. "Take it slow." As long as she was fine, everything was fine. As for her missing memories, she would be able to recover them sooner or later. Moreover, now was not the time to investigate this matter. While talking to Wuxia, Lu Yi vaguely sensed that the entire Wanxiangxi was in chaos. Everywhere, there were actually quite a number of Rizhao fighting each other. "First, tell me what happened just now." "Something must have happened while I was leveling up to Rizhao." "Formless Palace," Wuxia said. Through her explanation, Lu Yi finally understood where the chaos in the myriad phenomenon sea had come from. The source was actually Yaya. Yaya had previously broken 2 of her jade bracelets, recovering her sealed cultivation and memories. After helping Lu Yi and the others to injure Yuan Du, she quickly escaped. After she left, a portal suddenly opened, and a bone clan and a demon race cultivator chased after her. The 2 Rizhao chased in the direction of Yaya's escape, but they left the door open. Lu Yi had actually noticed this at the time, but didn't pay much attention to it. This was because a portal opened through a secret technique from a distance shouldn't be maintained for too long. Just as Lu Yi spread out the sea of blood, wantonly devouring the sunshine and moon jade of the Wanxiangxi, and then leveling up to Rizhao, a large number of cultivators suddenly rushed out from the portal. Surprisingly, there were more than 10 Rizhao leading a large number of moon jade and star constellations, descending from an unknown place to the Wanxiangxi. This unforeseen event caught the 2 sides fighting by surprise. This was because these cultivators who suddenly appeared were indiscriminate, and all those who were not on their side were enemies. The Rizhao who were fighting before were all involved. From afar, I heard someone shouting something about Formless Palace, so I guessed that these cultivators should be from this faction. Formless Palace. Lu Yi thought for a moment, and realized that he had never heard of this faction, let alone where it was located. But this should be the faction where Yaya came from. From the looks of it, the portal didn't disappear immediately after the 2 Rizhao passed through, causing Formless Palace to investigate the situation in the Wanxiangxi. Perhaps they used some method to strengthen the portal, and then invaded on a large scale. To any faction, the Wanxiangxi was a piece of delicious cake. Usually, they wouldn't have the chance to invade, but today's chaos gave Formless Palace hope, so they acted decisively. Not to mention completely occupying the Wanxiang Sea. They only needed to ransack the major spiritual islands, and Formless Palace would be able to make a fortune. After knowing the reason, Lu Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't expect the source of this chaos to be Yaya. But when Yaya helped him, she probably didn't think so much. Formless Palace's subsequent actions were just following the trend. To be able to send out more than 10 Rizhao after sending out the 2 Rizhao, this Formless Palace had a strong foundation. You'll stay here and protect me? Lu Yi asked. Wan Xiao, Yan Miao, and the rest couldn't stay. They were Rizhao, and they were 2 obvious targets. Only Wuxia stayed nearby after the chaos broke out. She kept an eye on Lu Ye's situation and didn't let anyone disturb him. Those Rizhao from Formless Palace were busy attacking the major spiritual islands and looting resources. Naturally, they didn't pay much attention to Lu Ye's situation. The Wanxiang Sea was in complete chaos. This was something that hadn't happened for many years. Tracing back to the last chaos in the Wanxiang Sea, it might have been tens of thousands of years ago. Many thoughts flashed through Lu Ye's mind. He vaguely sensed that this chaos wouldn't last long. There were more than 5 Rizhao from the Wanxiang galaxy. There were others. Once they received the news, they would definitely rush over to quell the chaos. They were not the only ones. If the forces behind the other spiritual islands knew that their spiritual islands were robbed, and their cultivators were killed, they would definitely not sit back and do nothing. They would definitely send reinforcements. With the connection of the worm path, as long as the news was transmitted in time, it wouldn't take much time. Formless Palace should also know about the situation in the Wanxiang Sea, so their current mentality should be to get something and run. But what about after they left? The Rizhao from the various galaxies gathered in the Wanxiang Sea. What kind of chaos would it be? The Rizhao from the major galaxies were willing to abide by the rules of the Wanxiang Sea and not come here easily, because they believed that the Wanxiang galaxy could protect their own interests and the safety of their cultivators. In fact, the Wanxiang galaxy had done a good job for so many years. They didn't give others a chance to interfere. The Formless Palace's chaos had ruined the reputation of the Wanxiang galaxy. They would definitely lose the trust of the major galaxies, giving their Rizhao a reason to interfere in the Wanxiang Sea. Perhaps from now on, the Rizhao from the local galaxy wouldn't be the only Rizhao on the Wanxiang Sea. Other Rizhao could also come and take charge. Although this was only Lu Ye's guess, it was very likely to happen. He was extremely glad that he had advanced to Rizhao at this time. Otherwise, the 3-world island wouldn't have much say at that stage. Who wouldn't covet such a top-grade spiritual island? He took out the sound talisman to check, and found that both Yin Miao and Luan Xiao could still transmit messages. This meant that the 2 women were still alive. As for Ma Bin, Lu Yi wasn't worried at all. The famous Green Demon King wouldn't die so easily. The chaos in the Wanxiang Sea was unavoidable. So what should they do to prepare for the future? Moreover, he had killed 3 Nikidoresu from the Wanxiang galaxy. He had formed a deadly feud with the local galaxy, and Ma Bin was on his side. Under normal circumstances, there would be no place for the cultivators of the 3 realms in the vast Wanxiang Sea. Previously, Lu Yi had been forced to retreat and give up the 3-world island. He was still willing to do so. However, now that he had advanced to Rizhao and had a trump card like Wuxia, he couldn't help but think differently. Why should the 3-world cultivators retreat and give up the 3-world island? This was the foundation that everyone had painstakingly built up. Thinking of this, hostility grew in his heart. The 3-world island was too small. Why not take the opportunity to control the Wanxiang Sea? In this way, the 3-world cultivators could have anything they wanted in the future. The Jade Snail Galaxy would also become a famous top galaxy in the universe sooner or later. Yes, with his current foundation, he was actually qualified to control the Wanxiang Sea. Once this thought appeared, he couldn't suppress it anymore. If it were in the past, Lu Yi might have considered it more. However, the black fruit on the talent tree still affected him greatly. This also caused him to be easily swayed by his emotions when considering things. Lu Yi suddenly turned his head to look at the chaotic 3-world island. He held Huasi's waist and said, "Keep your beast and don't leave my side." A familiar scent lingered at the tip of Lu Ye's nose. He greedily inhaled a breath. Huasi frowned secretly. She acutely sensed that something was wrong with Lu Ye's state. However, she still kept her beast and hugged it in her arms, allowing Lu Yi to hold her. In the next instant, two figures swept across the sky above the three-world island. Lu Yi coldly swept his gaze across. He could tell at a glance that some of the cultivators on the island were different. These cultivators' auras were especially arrogant, unrestrained and unbridled. If he wasn't mistaken, these cultivators with arrogant auras should be from the Formless Palace. At this moment, these Formless Palace cultivators were looting the major stores under the lead of the two Yu Yao. Perhaps some people had resisted before, but they were all killed without exception. Therefore, in the face of these outsiders looting, the cultivators of the major stores didn't dare to resist at all. After all, given the current situation on the three-world island, the two Yu Yao were enough to suppress everything. The Formless Palace had obviously investigated the situation here, so they left behind a few people to deal with the aftermath. Lu Yi was enraged. He immediately shouted, "Stop looting in my house." As soon as he finished speaking, a blood-red light shone around him. Blood arrows shot out from the sky. The Formless Palace cultivators who were looting everywhere, whether they were out in the open or in the dark. Some of them were even inside their houses. At this moment, they all suffered a devastating blow. The blood arrows pierced through the bodies of one cultivator after another, taking away their vitality. Even the two Yu Yao who had stayed behind to guard the stores weren't spared. They didn't even see who had attacked them before they lost their lives in a daze. End of chapter. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.